This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate second and final part of what if Naruto nearly gave up in Chunin exams. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
She grinned. Naruto wrapped his arms around her and drew her in. Yes, Naruto, you have. And you were always my inspiration, but after that, I realized I wanted to know you and be near you. So, I guess when you saved me that day was when I fell for you. With a sigh, she embraced him. I love you so much, Naruto. Thank you. Between that and now, you've done so much for me. With a sigh, he embraced her. She grinned, but she was intrigued. I love you too, Hina. Heim. And you've done more for me than I could ever do for you. Trust me. She gave him a curious look. She let out a disappointed sigh before nodding. I'll tell you soon, my love, I promise. I'm just not ready to tell you just yet. Please, just trust me and wait for me, she said. She then cuddled up to him and closed her eyes, saying, I'll wait, my love. I'm just glad I have you, that's all I need, and whenever you're ready to tell me, I'll be here. He raked his fingers through her hair, and she reached up to play with his hair in return. She noticed that she enjoyed the feel of his unexpectedly soft hair and smiled. She continued doing that even though he was doing the same to her after gradually realizing that he enjoyed it. She briefly opened her eyes to see that his were closed, then closed them once more before they fell asleep together, arms wrapped around each other and hands entangled in each other's hair. That night, they both slept deeper and more soundly than they had in years, and they were both grinning. Satisfied that Naruto and Hinata would be good for each other and happy together, Jiraiya and Hiyashi watched the young couple across the street, Hiyashi with his Byakugan. Then they both smiled, nodded, and vanished into the night. They both agreed in silence that the next generation was safe and vanished into the night, out of sight. When Naruto realized he wasn't alone, he slowly woke up and almost jumped out of bed. No, Naruto. Remember, think, and relax, he told himself. When he saw Hinata, he opened his eyes and grinned. That's right, he recalled slowly, she's here with me now. Never again will I be alone. When Hinata woke up and slowly opened her eyes, he was still grinning softly and staring at her. She had been up for a short while, thinking most of the same things that Naruto had when he first woke up. Although she felt fine, she initially became perplexed when she sensed powerful arms encircling her. She couldn't help but smile back when she opened her eyes and saw Naruto smiling. He said, Good morning, Hinata, and gave her a tender smile. Did you sleep well? For some strange reason, she felt suddenly shy and tucked herself into Naruto's chest, saying, Yes, Naruto, thank you. Her response made Naruto smile, and he held her close to him while softly massaging her back. Then his prankster side came out and he began to playfully tickle her, without being harsh or mean. She giggled uncontrollably as he tickled her legs, feet, and sides. When he began, Hinata was taken aback, but she soon burst out laughing, so she gave it her all and began tickling Naruto in return. Before long, both were crying uncontrollably and laughing so hard they were having trouble breathing. A voice said, Well, you two seem to be having fun, and then there was a loud laugh. Pervy sage! Exclaimed Naruto, irritated, after leaping roughly 5 feet. What in the world are you doing here? Checking up on you two, of course. And honestly, I'm glad you two are so close, he said with a laugh. It's good to see your parents' wishes coming true. After giving him a puzzled look, Naruto and Hinata smiled at each other as they recalled what he had said about their mothers being best friends. They were content together, regardless of what the elderly pervert had to say. Jiraiya was suddenly being tackled and tickled all over by 2 preteens. Jiraiya laughed and remarked on how wonderful it was to feel like a child again after he gasped in surprise, and the 3 of them started tickling and laughing. For the first time, Jiraiya felt like he was actually Naruto's godfather. Hinata felt truly loved by someone other than her father, and Naruto felt more connected to each other than he had in a long time. The 3 sat up and panted after playing for 30 minutes, at last remembering how to breathe. Hinata naturally burst out laughing as Naruto continued to look at her and laugh. The fact that Jiraiya was glancing between them as if he wasn't finished with either of them naturally made the 3 of them laugh. For approximately an hour, they simply enjoyed each other's company and felt like a family. After all these years, Naruto couldn't believe he finally had these bonds. He understood that these 2 were important to him, but he wouldn't really care if the rest of the village perished. That is, them and the Hokage, the elderly man, and, well, Konohamaru, but that's all. He didn't want him to suffer because the old man had protected him when no one else had when he was a young child, and now Hinata and Jiraiya had accepted and loved him unconditionally. He gradually became aware that he was beginning to consider the elderly pervert to be his father, and Hinata was, of course, his fiancée. Naruto, somewhat engrossed in his thoughts, sat back with a sigh of satisfaction. As always observant, Hinata asked him, "What are you thinking about?" He smiled at Jiraiya and took her hand in his, saying, "Just how precious you two are to me." The two individuals grinned. Hinata gave him a hug, and Jiraiya reached over to caress his hair. "Hinata, you're my future, my family. And Jiraiya, you're the closest thing I've had to a father. You both mean so much to me. Thank you both." For a while afterward, the three sat in silence, thinking about how wonderful it was to have someone, how at ease they felt together, and how close they were already, which astounded them all. In fact, they all felt good overall, as if the future was bright just because they were all together. Jiraiya eventually stood up and told the two to get ready for the day before heading out into the living room. Though they were a little uncomfortable changing in front of each other, Naruto and Hinata felt that it was appropriate. After putting on their typical training attire, Hinata in her loose fitting coat and Naruto in his orange jumpsuit, they exchanged glances and chuckled at how unremarkable it was. After putting his arms around her, Naruto gave her a gentle hug and a kiss before heading back to the living room to be with Jiraiya. Jiraiya opened the apartment door and let in a rather stiff Hiyashi while the two preteens were getting ready. While the two children were away, the two sat down to work out the last details of their plan. Hiyashi inquired, "How did Naruto take it? I doubt you could tear the two apart now. I actually walked in on them tickling one another. That was amusing. Then they dragged me into it," Jiraiya said, attempting, and failing, to hide his smile. He seemed more than happy to have Hinata here. "You don't seem to have minded," Hiyashi smiled and teased. "No, I didn't. It was fun to feel like a kid again. That. And what Naruto told me didn't hurt either." Hiyashi raised his eyebrows. Hiyashi looked surprised as he said, "He told me I'm like a father to him." "I know. I think I'm the only one to really stand up for the kid, so he sees me as a line of defense in a way. And he's never had that, so he's decided I'm precious to him. Me and Hinata both. He sees us as his family now. I doubt you would be able to get him away from either of us without either killing us or coming close to death yourself." Hiyashi grinned. He was overjoyed that his daughter had found a boy who was so considerate. Jiraiya nodded and said, "He'll be a good man. A good husband and father, someday. So it seems our plan has worked then? It's bringing Hinata out of her shell, making Naruto calm down, and bringing family to them both. Yes, it's worked better than either of us thought it would. I'm glad to see it coming to fruition." Jiraiya's awkward formality made Hiyashi laugh. "I'm glad to see it's worked too. Hinata is a sweet girl, and she deserves the best. I'm happy to see she's found it." Jiraiya gave a thoughtful nod. Hiyashi nodded, clearly understanding Jiraiya's meaning. "I suppose this will make it easier when I have to take him away from the village. Which will be soon, by the way. You'll miss her, won't you?" "Of course I'll miss her. She's my daughter after all. But I'm confident that you and Naruto will keep her safe and that she'll be loved. Will she return to me a Hyuga?" "I rather doubt it, but if you request it, I will see to it she does." "I'd rather she did. If not, at least promise me you'll alert me so I can be at their wedding. I want to give her away myself." Jiraiya nodded after laughing out loud. "That's the least I can do, I suppose. I'm sure Hinata would want you to be there. And Naruto would probably be proud as well to have that occur. I would be there as Naruto's father, of course, so I would be very glad to see you there when I danced with Hinata." Hiyashi couldn't contain his laughter at that picture. He looked a little sad when he said, "I only wish my wife could be there to dance with Naruto at the same time." Then he recalled how close his wife had been to Kushina. He smiled. Jiraiya nodded, and Hiyashi went on, "I better get going. I look forward to hearing from you again, Master Jiraiya. And don't forget." Hiyashi bowed slightly and walked away. I'm sure their mothers would be proud of them. The door to Naruto's room opened as the one behind him closed. Hinata and Naruto when they emerged, Jiraiya was standing in the kitchen, staring at the door as though she was considering something. Naruto gestured at the preoccupied pervert and gave Hinata a gentle jab at the side. She nodded and giggled. Naruto slouched in front of Jiraiya after motioning for her to follow him. When Hinata was right behind him, on the opposite side of the couch, she burst out laughing, and Naruto leapt up and pushed him back. After Jiraiya stumbled and fell onto the couch, Naruto landed on top of him. Hinata then leapt at the two of them, and all of a sudden, the three of them were in the middle of the second round of their earlier tickle fight. Before long, the three were laughing as loudly and forcefully as ever, their eyes watering as they struggled to remember how to breathe. After the three of them had calmed down, they sat and laughed for a while Naruto held Jiraiya and Hinata and grinned broadly at them. Jiraiya grinned and said, "Come on you two lovebirds. Let's get some breakfast so we can go train." After getting up, Naruto prepared juice, toast, bacon, and eggs for the three of them. Following their meal, Jiraiya teased, "I'm surprised you know how to make all this, Naruto. I thought all you ate was ramen." Despite his serious response, Naruto smiled at the jab. He shrugged, grinning sadly as he recalled all the meals he'd prepared alone just for himself, then grinned a little happier when he realized that he'd always have someone to share meals with. "I only eat ramen so much because Tucci and Ayame accept me. I feel safe there, and that's rare for me. I learned how to cook a lot of stuff from some recipe books I found in my father's house. I don't know how or why, but I've always had a natural knack for cooking." They both nodded, and the three of them concluded their meals in pleasant silence while reflecting on how promising their future together seemed. "I'm just glad you two like it." Following breakfast, Jiraiya walked closely behind Naruto and Hinata as they made their way to a nearby training ground, keeping an eye out to make sure no villagers were bothering them. Now no one bothered them. They wouldn't dare because of Jiraiya's presence and Naruto's now known ancestry. Furthermore, Hinata's Byakugan activation didn't cause any harm. She, on the other hand, was glaring at any villager who dared to look at Naruto. Knowing that these two individuals, who were so important to him, were protecting him from the villagers made Naruto smile. Naruto continued to reflect on his desire for respect and concern from others, and he realized that he had more than fulfilled his dream. The villagers didn't like him, but they stopped bothering him after he had Hinata and was accepted by Jiraiya. He was content. Then an idea came to him. A new dream was what he needed. Why should he continue training when he had no dream to keep him focused? Putting that idea out of his mind for the time being, he shook his head. Later, he'd consider that. In other parts of Fire Country, unbeknownst to Naruto, a young woman with blonde hair and pigtails and another with dark hair that fell straight to her shoulders strolled through a somewhat shady area of a small business town some 100 miles away. The brunette was holding a pink briefcase in one hand and a small pig in the other. There were small denomination bills in the briefcase, and a good number of them. The blonde Tsunade was aware that there were roughly 2,000 ryo inside. The brunette, Shizune, was anxious. She was familiar with Tsunade's expression. She also had some reservations about the briefcase's durability. With good reason, Tsunade was dubbed the legendary sucker. Despite her lack of skill and luck, she was unable to quit gambling. Tsunade was aware of her bad luck. That was something she had long since adapted to. But she was unable to stop. She was aware that it was an addiction, much like her drinking, and Shizune was determined to overcome both of those addictions. Knowing what Shizune was thinking, she laughed at her nervousness. She was also aware that her money would run out if Shizune was correct, which she most likely was, but she would have luck in other areas. She gambled with her money because of this. She always had luck in other areas of her life, which were much more significant to her, as long as she was unlucky in that. She did, after all, have an almost limitless fortune. Naturally, Shizune was nervous as they entered a seedy gambling hall, while Tsunade was eager to get started. Tsunade took a seat, opened her briefcase, handed over her cash, grabbed her chips, and prepared to begin. Shizune's anxiety increased when she noticed the expressions on everyone's faces. Naturally, they were aware of Tsunade's identity. Oh no! The money was going to disappear quickly now. Half an hour later, Tsunade was growing anxious. She had well over 300,000 ryo now, compared to roughly 2,000 at the beginning. Since sitting down, she hadn't lost a hand. Shizune appeared happy, but Tsunade was aware that her luck in other areas quickly declined after she struck it lucky in gambling. It was the biggest hit she had ever had. What on earth was going to occur? Without a doubt, it wasn't good. And to be so successful at cards. Alright, what the devil? That did not occur, at any rate, not for her. Tsunade barely managed to carry her cash as she cashed out and left, maintaining a composed demeanor. Shizune was aware that something was wrong, but she dared not inquire. She simply trailed Tsunade. Words weren't necessary because the two knew each other so well. Shizune was aware that every time Tsunade struck it hard like this, something negative would occur. Additionally, this was Tsunade's largest haul to date. Naruto and Hinata were training together in the meantime, completely oblivious to the misfortune that was upon them. By this point, they had both mastered the Rasengan, and Naruto was putting a lot of effort into integrating all the elements into it simultaneously. After some experimentation, he had figured out the order, but he was obviously struggling with the final element he had to enter, Earth, which was his hardest element overall and specifically for this. He had repeatedly added wind, lightning, fire, and water, but each time he attempted to add Earth, it fell apart. Since water was Hinata's affinity, she was simultaneously working on transforming it into her own. Grinning, Naruto showed her the element 1 he currently possessed. It radiated a strange light that was more like purple than anything else. Then he narrowed his focus a little and began to try to bring the earth back into it. His confidence increased when he noticed Hinata grinning at him. His Rasengan turned white as his focus increased and his smile widened. He let out a gasp and held it there. After that, he turned and pushed it against a nearby rock, causing it to completely collapse. He turned to face Hinata, who was beaming maniacally. She brought her water version to the nearby stream, and the water did indeed react. As she stood on it, responding to the force of her Rasengan, it was spinning around her. After giving him a smile, she threw it into the water and continued to smile as the water spun wildly around her due to her water chakra. After dispelling the jutsu, she rushed to embrace Naruto. He did the same, and the two stood like that for a time, simply enjoying each other's company. Despite his desire to interrupt them, Jiraiya was unable to do so. The two deserved some alone time after training diligently all morning. When he realized he considered them his family, he simply stood back and grinned. Hinata is essentially his goddaughter, and Naruto is his godson. He grinned as he considered their future together. Kids, of course, and Jiraiya got a little nosebleed as he laughed to himself at what that meant. Pervert alert. He grinned after that, considering indirectly becoming a grandfather. He then realized he had a few years to wait after reminding himself how young his two charges were. A little while later, Jiraiya informed them that the three of them would be departing shortly to train. He promised Naruto that he would teach him everything he knew, from ninjutsu to every seal he had ever used, and that he would teach Hinata everything he could about the gentle fist. He refused to elaborate, saying only, "You'll need it, both of you," when they questioned why. Naruto chose to find joy in this. He would be alone with Hinata, his father figure, and his beloved people for a very long time. He grinned as he considered how promising the future was once more. He knew he would eventually have to confront his troubled past and tell the other two about it, but he decided that later was better than never. Hinata was overjoyed. Her dreams were coming true in ways she never would have thought possible, and now this. She had just left the Hyuga compound and moved in with Naruto. It was simply too much. She blushed, got a nosebleed. Yes, the little closet pervert is having those thoughts, smiled, and fainted after learning everything. After 10 minutes or so, Naruto finally roused her, chuckling a little at her spell of fainting. He gave her a smile. He made a joke. "I thought you were over that." "I did, too," she said, but apparently not. He sounded concerned as he said, "Did you hurt yourself or something? Your nose is bleeding." This made Jiraiya and Hinata laugh, and when he looked at them both with a look of bewilderment on his face, they both laughed even harder. Angry, he humped, "What's so funny?" Naturally, this made the other two laugh to new heights. Eventually, the sight of Jiraiya and Hinata giggling so hard that Naruto started laughing too, even though he had no idea why they were laughing. Before long, they were all on the ground, laughing hysterically while holding their sides. The three of them grew closer and more like a real family as the remainder of that day went by in a comparatively calm manner. Jiraiya was satisfied, Hinata felt calm, and Naruto was joyful. They all believed that the future was bright and that they would face any challenges together, whether they were positive or negative. They had no idea that their small group would not be facing this challenge alone. After their bonding session, Naruto, Hinata, and Jiraiya were called to the Hokage's office the following morning. To Sarutobi, the three bowed. Jiraiya said, "You called for us, sensei." "Yes, Jiraiya. I wish to tell you that the three of you are going to be assigned another team member. I have spoken to the young man and he is aware of your special nature, Naruto, and he accepts it. Team 7 is gaining a member from his team, and his team is being dissolved. Incidentally, it's one of your old teammates, Hinata. Your team has been disbanded. Shino will be joining you too, and Kiba will take Naruto's place on Team 7. Sarutobi stated all of this clearly. He was a little concerned about the three's reaction to this. The three said, "Understood, Lord Hokage," in unison. "So Shino knows, huh?" Naruto asked after giving it some thought, and Sarutobi nodded. "How did he find out?" "I told him. Given the reaction of your former teammates, I wanted to make sure whoever you were teamed with now, you would be accepted by that person. Shino sees you as a comrade and one who is worthy of his loyalty regardless of what is inside you, so I doubt you'll have any problems with him." Naruto gave a nod. Having another true friend made him happy. He grinned. For the first time, his situation was improving. Hinata blushed and smiled as he gently put an arm around her, not really caring who saw. Naruto said, "Thank you, Lord Hokage." Sarutobi said, "Okay, now, this is not exactly normal procedure, but since all three of you were enrolled in the Chunin exams, and since the finals are individual anyway, I'm going to allow you to compete. However, there is a mission I need the three of you to complete before then, with the weight of all his years bearing down on him. He let out a sigh. He had no choice but to do this to them, even though he hated it. I need the four of you, counting Shino, to find and bring back my successor. I have made my choice, and I need the four of you to retrieve her. I would normally not send you on missions before the exams, but I need her here before then, so I have no choice. Your squad is the only one available. Obviously, this means you have a rather tight time limit. I need you to find her and get her back here within 2 weeks. Oh, and Naruto, that promise I made you still stands. I just realized that I need to retire a bit sooner than that. After nodding, the three bowed a little. Though a little let down, Naruto recognized that Sarutobi was an elderly man. In order to locate Shino and continue their journey, they turned to depart. The only one to speak was Naruto. Leave it to me, old man. I'll find her and get her back here for you. He smiled at the Hokage in his usual silly manner, and then all three disappeared, leaving Sarutobi to laugh and shake his head. Despite himself, he was relieved to see Naruto returning to his former habits, at least somewhat. Half an hour later, when Naruto saw the other three waiting for him at the village gate, he smiled. After Hinata had located Shino at his house, the three of them gathered at the gate to await Naruto. Shino nodded. Jiraiya smiled kindly at him, and Hinata smiled shyly. Jiraiya spoke after waiting for his entire team to arrive. A few seconds after saying, "Let's move out, kids." The four of them were leaping from tree to tree. Naturally, Naruto and Hinata were drawn to each other. Shino was a little alone because he was used to being alone, and Jiraiya led the way, ahead of the others. After all, he was the only one who knew their destination. With a shy smile, Naruto reached out and took Hinata's hand in his. Hinata returned the smile, blushing slightly, and the four of them proceeded in that manner, with Jiraiya and Shino each lost in their own thoughts while Naruto and Hinata linked. It was early in the morning, which the small group appreciated. They had all day to travel if needed, and it was still cool. Good evening. They had spent the entire day traveling, with Jiraiya leading the way, Shino just jumping with the others, and Naruto and Hinata holding hands. Before long, they reached a small town as the sun was just starting to rise. According to Jiraiya's spy network, Tsunade was located here. They were after her. Thinking of the time he had spent with her as a child, he laughed. He glanced at Naruto and Hinata for a moment. The expression in Naruto's eyes made him think of how he had felt when he had looked at Tsunade. For her part, Hinata appeared happy. Grinning, he guided the group into the town. They were able to reserve 2 hotel rooms in 10 minutes. One would be shared by Naruto and Hinata, and the other by Shino and Jiraiya. The four separated into their rooms, and Shino fell asleep almost instantly after lying down. He was exhausted, especially after their lengthy journey, because he was accustomed to rising and setting with the sun. Jiraiya went out to find Tsunade because he had already heard that she was in town. After entering their room, Naruto and Hinata took a seat together. Hinata blushed and smiled at Naruto as he gently took her hand. Neither of them had spoken during their entire day together. It was enough to be together. They were alone now. Naruto let out a sigh. That was a long trip. Hinata gave a nod. Naruto couldn't help but smile when he said, "Yes, it was. I'm really tired. I'm sure my legs will be stiff tomorrow. And my back is killing me." Hinata saw his smile. "What?" With a tender smile, he asked, "Would you like a massage?" It was the first time anyone had ever asked her that, and Hinata gasped. When Naruto noticed her shocked expression, he clarified. "I've been told I have magic hands. I gave Sakura a massage once when she pulled a muscle and she said it was really good." That was before. His tone faded away. That was not something he wanted to discuss. At least not yet. When Hinata noticed his distress, she hurried to comfort him. "I'd love one, Naruto. I just wasn't expecting you to ask that. No one's ever offered me that before." Naruto grinned. "Do you trust me, Hinata?" After giving him a strange look, she nodded. "I trust you with my life, Naruto. Now and always. But why do you ask that?" She gasped when Naruto gently placed a hand on her leg, and as he began massaging it, she could feel her muscles loosen up beneath his fingers. She looked at him strangely. He said, "I've always wanted to give someone a full body massage." Hinata gave him a curious look. "You mentioned that your legs were sore too. I was wondering if I could try something. It's something I've never done before, but always wanted to." She let out a gasp. The idea itself delighted her. She imagined that his hands were touching her everywhere on her body. She smiled at the thought, finding it very pleasant, even if it caused a slight nosebleed. She grinned and nodded as she glanced up at him while cleaning the blood from her nose. "That sounds very nice, Naruto." He laughed. "There is a bit of a catch though," he explained to her. She appeared anxious. Jiraiya he was entering a small bar on the opposite side of town, figuring that this was probably where he would find his target. She was indeed there when he looked up. He laughed at his good fortune. It was simple. He yelled, "Tsunade," and gestured to her. Tsunade raised her gaze. It was unbelievable to her. Standing there, pointing at her, was her former teammate. "Jiraiya?" she exclaimed as she got to her feet, and he laughed and approached her. He took a seat in the booth she shared with Tun Tun and Shizune. He nodded to each of the women and said, "Hello, Tsunade, Shizune, I'm glad I found you." Flustered and irritated that her former teammate had located her, she said, "What do you want, Jiraiya?" She simply disliked being taken by surprise like this, not because she hated him. "All right, I'll get right to the point. You've been chosen as the 5th Hokage. Along with 3 genin, I have been sent to retrieve you and bring you back to the village," Jiraiya replied. Tsunade chuckled after being startled. Her first instinct was to say no, but she changed her mind. She thought back to the 2 people she had genuinely loved who both aspired to be Hokage. Eventually, she nodded, remembering them and her grandfather, the first Hokage. She whispered, "I'll do it, but on one condition." "Name it," Jiraiya grinned. This was better than his initial expectation that she would say no. At her response, Jiraiya gasped, "No more research," then he paused to think. "That's fine. I won't have time to do any research anyway. I'll be too busy training my team," he said with a grin. Tsunade appeared taken aback. Jiraiya clarified. Tsunade appeared shocked when she said, "I said I was sent here with a trio of genin. One of them is Minato's son." He went on to describe the circumstances surrounding Naruto and Hinata and the reason Shino was a member of their team, saying, "Then there is Hinata Hyuga, heir of that clan, and Shino Aburame, heir of his. They are a team, and I am their sensei, so I won't have time to do my research anyway. I'll be too busy taking care of them and training them." Imagining Minato's son with Hiyoshi's daughter, Tsunade laughed. She was pleased for them because she knew that was what both of their mothers had desired. Jiraiya nodded and informed her of the hotel, room numbers, and the individuals in each room. "All right. I'll come back and do the job. I take it you all are in a hotel tonight?" Jiraiya asked. When she saw that Naruto and Hinata were alone in a room, she arched an eyebrow, but she ignored it because she remembered that they were engaged. The thought of the 2 of them living together also made her laugh, and she knew she was going to find things interesting there. Additionally, Jiraiya had informed her that Hiyoshi knew they were living together and that he was okay with it. She thought about that and nodded. The former teammates split up after 30 minutes of planning. Shino was sound asleep when Jiraiya returned to his hotel room, and Tsunade had gone to her own room to pack her belongings. In order to return to Konoha, they had decided to meet at the town's main gates the next morning. Hinata gazed at Naruto, perplexed and a little worried. A catch? There was a catch to what he had said. That had sounded too good to be true, she knew. Yes, it was too much when he put his hands on her and relaxed her. A catch had to exist. With trepidation, she said, "Okay. What's the catch?" She observed Naruto's gaze. He appeared anxious as he observed her body. "Well, when I give a massage, I need to touch the skin directly. It wasn't bad when Sakura hurt herself, because she hurt her arm, but if I'm going to do your whole body." He continued to trail off, anxious. He truly wanted to do it, but he was afraid she would despise him for it. She said, "What is it, Naruto?" Though she wasn't positive, she had a notion of what he had in mind. She was giddy with anticipation at the thought of what she believed he was discussing. She wasn't going to say that, even though she felt he wanted her nude. He would assume she was a pervert or something if she was mistaken. He turned his head away from her and blushed. "Well, if I'm going to massage your whole body, I'll need you to be naked," he said. "I promise I won't look. I just need your skin to be bare so I can massage you." She turned red. She was correct, yes, he did want her nude. He had also stated it. She paused to think. She did want this. She desired for him to see her whole self. Thinking about it made her anxious, but it also made her excited. She turned to face him and saw fear and hope in his eyes. She gave him a smile. "All right. And it's okay. You don't have to look away, Naruto." He turned a deep scarlet. "Are you sure, Hinata? I don't want you to feel uncomfortable." She gave a nod. As they considered this, they both blushed. "All of me is yours, Naruto. So it's perfectly all right for you to see me." Naruto approached her and gave her a tender kiss. She kissed him back in response. The 2 wrapped their arms around each other and repeatedly kissed, enjoying the touch but never forcing or deepening their kisses. Hinata ended up sitting on Naruto's lap during the kiss, and the 2 withdrew after a few minutes. They exchanged a smile. Naruto whirled around and produced a scroll. He placed it on the floor, touched 2 places on it, and it spread out in a seal, covering the door, the windows, and the room's walls. He looked over at Hinata. Now no one can see or hear into here. They'll see a black room if they look and they'll hear nothing. I'm glad I learned that seal, he said with a grin. Hinata gave him another tender kiss before turning her back on him. Naruto observed her. As she gradually took off her jacket, she could feel his gaze on her. Slowly, she removed her top, then unfastened and took off her bra, throwing both of them aside. She blushed as she slowly turned to face him. She had covered herself with her arms. She exposed herself to him by lowering her arms gradually. Astonished by Hinata's level of development, Naruto flushed. He nearly averted his gaze, but instead he grinned as he met her eyes. She smiled back, blushing even more. She hesitated for a second, then leaned down and took off her panties and pants. He looked at her entire body and blushed. Hinata gave him a look. When she noticed he was staring at her, she said, "What?" Naruto smiled at Hinata and remarked, "You're so beautiful, Hinata." He approached her, embraced her, and gave her another kiss. She gave an enthusiastic response, her body thrilled by her nudity and his proximity to her. Hinata turned her head to the side, settling herself as comfortably as she could after Naruto led her to the bed and placed her on her stomach. Admiring her physique, Naruto approached her. In some ways, he was happy that she concealed her beauty in her loose clothing, but he couldn't understand why she did it. In this manner, she would only ever be seen by him. With a laugh, Naruto climbed onto the bed. He put his weight on her butt while straddling her. Reaching up, he placed his hands on her shoulders and began to rub her. His hands took hold of her shoulders and gave them a light but firm rub. Her muscles relaxed beneath his hands, and she felt a tiny bit of his chakra entering her. Her tense muscles relaxed, and she groaned with pleasure. Naruto gave her a smile. He continued to rub her shoulders, then bent over and gave her a kiss in return. She tensed up a bit in shock, then relaxed further. He proceeded to her arms and worked on each muscle until they were totally relaxed. With a sigh of pleasure, Hinata felt her body turn to putty. Under Naruto's touch, she writhed, feeling wonderful and not attempting to move. After passing through her arms, he proceeded to her back, then her legs. In his hands, everything he touched seemed to relax and turn into putty. When his hands passed over her butt, Hinata gasped, but she remained motionless. He then proceeded to massage her legs. This continued for about 20 minutes before Naruto got up and began to rub her back gently, not massaging, just rubbing. Leaning down, he began kissing her back, his lips trailing his hands. His touch caused Hinata to tremble as she felt her body respond to him. Her body was getting excited, and she could feel the warmth radiating from her core to every part of her body. She closed her eyes in pleasure and shivered. As her thoughts wandered, she had an epiphany. She desired him. Every single one of him. Although she was aware of what sex was, she had never had the desire for it. She did now that Naruto's hands were on her and his lips were caressing her back. She desired to have him inside of her. Naruto was experiencing a similar emotion. Yes, he had occasionally experienced an erection, but he had never before been around a girl like this. He had no idea how sex even operated. He only knew that Hinata's body responded each time he touched it. According to her responses, he continued because she seemed to enjoy what he was doing. His legs gently brushed against hers, his lips brushed her back, and his hands moved up and down her sides and back. Hinata made up her mind about what to do. She wasn't prepared for that yet, but she wanted him. But she wanted to see his body. She tried to roll over after shifting. He lifted off her after sensing her movement. She turned over on her back, dragged him down, and gave him a passionate kiss. Naruto responded with excitement. Hinata reached up and unzipped Naruto's jacket while flushed. He blushed as she removed it from him, but he gave in to her demands. She removed his top and was astounded to see his firm abs and trim chest. After blushing, she touched him and felt his strong muscles. The joy of her touch filled Naruto as he closed his eyes. He knew he wanted her and his body was responding to her, but he didn't want to force her to do anything she wasn't prepared for. A few seconds later, Hinata reached down and took off his boxers and pants as well. Because he didn't want her to feel awkward with his body against hers, he rolled off her and lay next to her. Hinata's gaze swept across Naruto's body. Her body craved his as she flushed, but she knew it was too soon. She approached him, encircling him with her arms and drawing his body to hers. She flushed as she felt his erection against her. She loved feeling it against her, but she did nothing about it. He didn't pull away, but he did appear uneasy. He smiled at her and wrapped his arms around her as well. Hinata spoke softly, "It's okay, Naruto. I want this. Just no more than this for now, okay?" Naruto gave a nod. "I'm surprised you'd even do this much. Thank you, Hinata." With a sigh of pleasure, she embraced him. Her head rested on his chest. Naruto closed his eyes and embraced her. When she noticed this, she realized they were both exhausted. She also closed her eyes. In a matter of seconds, neither of them bothered to cover themselves with a sheet or blanket. The morning after, slowly, Naruto woke up. It took him a moment to realize he was nude. Then he understood that he was not alone. In his arms was Hinata, also nude. He rubbed her back and grinned as he recalled the previous evening. Hinata stirred slowly in his arms. She glanced up at him, recalling the night before and reaching the same conclusions as him. Despite the fact that they were both nude, the two held each other close and kissed. Before they heard the door open, that is. The last person Naruto wanted to see at that precise moment was there when he looked. Jiraiya stood there staring at the two people in the room with her mouth open. Naruto flung himself over Hinata as she squeaked, shielding her body from Jiraiya's roving gaze. Naruto yelled, "Get out of here, Jiraiya!" The elderly man regained consciousness. At least, as much as Jiraiya ever does. With a proud, "Way to go, kid, I knew I trained you well," Jiraiya gave Naruto 2 thumbs up. Without bothering to cover himself, Naruto flew out of bed and pushed Jiraiya out the door. After locking and slamming the door, he turned back to Hinata. She was covering herself with the bed's sheets, and her face appeared to be burning from blushing. Naruto approached her and carefully pushed the sheet away. He gave her a smile. He took her in his arms and said, "It's okay, Hinata. I'm here." After shivering in embarrassment, she wrapped her arms around Naruto. It was better somehow just knowing he was there. Both had calmed down after a short while, and Naruto stood up to get their clothes. He took Hinata's clothes first and gave them to her. Almost reluctant to hide from him once more, she dressed slowly. Then, as she watched him get dressed, she was reminded of how wonderful his body felt against hers. Hinata looked over at Naruto. "Naruto?" he asked, turning to face her with a curious expression. She approached him and put her arms around him. She put her face against his chest. Naruto encircled her with his arms. "I love you so much, Naruto." He grinned and said, "I love you too, Hinata. I always will." For a short while, the two stood together, encircling each other in their arms. Naruto then gave Hinata a smile. "We should check on Jiraiya. I hit him pretty hard." Looking out into the hallway, the two opened their door. Hinata grinned at how protective Naruto had become of her after he shook his head. Jiraiya was unconscious after becoming firmly embedded in the wall. The two approached, carried the elderly pervert into the room he had shared with Shino, and pulled him out of the wall. The 3 genin sat waiting for Jiraiya to awaken, while Shino was already dressed and up. Without revealing their own nudity, Naruto and Hinata explained what had transpired to Shino. Naruto's strength appeared to impress Shino. "It would seem you're very protective of Hinata, Naruto," said Shino. Naruto gave a nod. Hinata blushed when Shino referred to her as Naruto's mate, but the young couple both grinned and moved closer to each other. "This is logical. You are protective of your mate, a very admirable trait." The door opened once more as the 3 sat there, Hinata and Naruto holding each other. Hinata and the newcomer were separated by Naruto. 2 women intervened and he went on the defensive. One had a green dot on her forehead and blonde hair in 2 pigtails. The other was a pig being carried by a trim brunette. After giving what he was seeing some thought, Naruto burst out laughing when he recognized the blonde as Tsunade. Tsunade gave him a look. His appearance startled her until she recognized that he had to be Minato's son. She turned to Shino and said, "So you're Naruto, huh? And the young lady behind you must be Hinata." Shino nodded and asked, "And you're Shino?" "Yes." After nodding while still laughing, Naruto collapsed to the ground. "Okay, Naruto, what is so funny?" "Your hair is in pigtails, and she's carrying a pig," exclaimed Naruto, who was still laughing and holding his sides. Hinata burst out laughing at this, and soon after, Shizune and Tsunade also burst out laughing. Soon, everyone was rolling around on the ground laughing, with the exception of Shino and Jiraiya. The 4 were unable to stand and breathe normally for 10 minutes. When they were able, Naruto told Tsunade and Shizune why Jiraiya was unconscious, omitting once more that he and Hinata were nude. Tsunade informed everyone that their mission had been successful because she had consented to return to the village. With a smile, the 3 genin congratulated each other. They were successful in their first mission together, which was an A rank. Jiraiya woke up, and the 6 individuals and 1 pig began their journey back to Konoha after checking out of the hotel. After only 2 days away, Naruto, Hinata, and Shino had made their way back to the village. To say the least, Sarutobi was impressed. He proclaimed his retirement to the village as soon as he saw his former pupil Tsunade, and the following day Tsunade was sworn in as the 5th Hokage. Although that was the official event, she would actually be training to become Hokage for several months, during which her old sensei Sarutobi would continue to serve as the acting Hokage, save for meetings and other events, in which case he would assist her. Over the course of the following few days, Naruto spent time with his team, getting to know Shino a little, introducing him to the training regimen, strengthening his bonds with Hinata and Jiraiya, the latter of whom he was beginning to regard as a father figure, and letting Shino share some of their bonds. Now all 4 of them had complete faith in each other. 2 teenagers and an elderly man could be seen clearing the trees a few seconds after Naruto shouted, "Jump!" The other 3 did the same, but 3 teenagers cleared the trees if Jiraiya was shouting. This idea applied to everything that any of them could say or shout. For the first time in his life, Naruto experienced genuine acceptance. But he couldn't shake the memories of the last time he experienced that emotion, only to have it torn from him. For a while, Naruto was spending time by himself, even away from Hinata. He was actually going out to reflect and relive those moments, even though he had told her he was only going for a walk. Before he had been with her, he had endured this torture a few times a month, but he had recently avoided it, so he felt compelled to do it today. He discovered a big boulder about a mile away from the house where the team had trained that day. He mounted it and took a seat. He closed his eyes and reclined on the boulder, allowing the memories to wash over him. Rewind. Entering the classroom was Naruto. They were scheduled to be divided into teams today. As usual, he sat alone. Although he was unaware of it at the time, he later realized that a certain young girl was, as usual, observing him that day. Only Hinata appeared to be happy to see him there. The other students in the class either didn't give a damn or would have preferred his absence. He had been seated there for a short time when the door suddenly flew open, letting Sakura and Ino in, both of them panting and claiming to have gained the privilege of sitting with Sasuke. He let out a moan. He reflected, it's always about Sasuke. He rose and approached Sasuke. He sat down at the desk and scowled at the Uchiha boy as he tried to make sense of this. He simply did not understand. The girls were all berating him for staring at Sasuke, of course. He was indifferent. He gave the boy a more intense glare. What on earth did they notice about the man? He was a royal prick who was harsh and frigid. What on earth were they seeing in him? Someone bumped him from behind while he was still glaring at the boy, trying to understand what the hell they saw in him. End of flashback. Naruto laughed inwardly. He would prefer not to recall the specifics of what transpired at that moment. They were given the task of being his team on the day he first met them. The moment he nodded, it began. His mind followed them to the next important event, as was usual with this torture. Rewind. The post had Naruto bound to it. The 3 of them were unsuccessful since they were unable to understand the purpose of Kakashi's test. Naruto was tied to the post for attempting to eat by himself, while the other 2 were told they could eat. The others were also instructed not to give him any food. Sasuke mentioned how Naruto's weakness was harming the team. Sakura stood up and gave him a bite after a brief argument. An angry Kakashi materialized in front of them. Sakura and Sasuke both leapt to his aid. Sakura responded, "We gave our lunch to him because the 3 of us are one." Those were the words Naruto would never forget. They took him in. With a smile on his face, Kakashi said, "You pass." The 3 were perplexed, so he clarified that they had passed because they had realized they needed to put the team's needs ahead of their own. That doesn't really matter to Naruto. All he could think about was that he had been accepted by his teammates. After that, they all departed without untying him. He let out a moan. Figured. End of flashback. Reflecting on that moment, Naruto laughed. Even though he was grinning, he was crying because he recalled how wonderful it had been to be accepted by them. When he lost that acceptance, he heard a voice just as his mind was about to proceed to the memory he always dreaded. He turned to see Hinata on the boulder with him. She noticed that he was crying. Approaching him, Hinata put her arms around him. She said, "What's wrong, Naruto? Please, tell me, why are you crying? What happened to you?" Naruto embraced her. He let out a sigh. She was entitled to know the truth. He turned to her and gently held her while lowering her onto his lap. She stroked his spiky hair while grinning up at him. He grinned. "All right, Hinata, I'll tell you. You deserve to know. After all, since you're with me, you deserve to know what you're getting yourself into," he said, making himself smile for her. "You remember when my old team got sent to the Land of Waves, right?" She grinned. After saying, "That's where it happened," he began to tell his story. Rewind. The bridge had been reached by Naruto. He saw the ice mirrors of Haku. Sasuke stood in the center. He saw how Sasuke appeared to be being stabbed with needles from all sides. There was nothing he could do about it. Never in his life had he felt so powerless. Perhaps that had not been the best way to announce his arrival. Hinata chuckled at that. Naruto watched in disbelief as Sasuke's body started to take on the appearance of a porcupine due to the numerous needles that were hurled at him. Naruto was completely powerless. He was unable to enter the Dome of Mirrors, and he could see that Sasuke was unable to exit. Then, as he sat on his knees inside, Sasuke gave him a direct look. Then he closed his eyes, collapsed forward, and remained motionless. Naruto let out a gasp, tears welling up in his eyes. He didn't want Sasuke to die, even though he and Sasuke had never really gotten along. An unexpected anger welled up inside Naruto. He felt himself growing stronger as his anger increased. He was surrounded by a red haze of chakra, though he was unaware of it at the time. With a roar of pain and rage, he threw back his head. With two tails emerging from the base of Naruto's spine, the red chakra assumed the shape of a fox. He rushed ahead. Before anyone knew it, Naruto had broken the mirror closest to him. Then he found himself in the center of the dome. The chakra grew and shattered the remaining mirrors as he screamed once more. Naruto just grabbed his hand as the young shinobi who had been hiding in one of them approached. Despite the mask getting in the way, Naruto could tell the boy was shocked. Naruto yelled, "I'll kill you for this." Despite his opponent's obvious fear of him, he continued. He withdrew and struck the shinobi in the face, simultaneously drawing him in with the arm he seized. The young boy was killed when the shinobi's neck broke from the punch, shocking Naruto. He heard a crackling sound while he was doing this, followed by a scream. He later learned that Kakashi had struck Zabuza with his Chidori, and then what sounded like laughter. Naruto was still furious in spite of his shock. He didn't hesitate to charge when he saw the sizable contingent of thugs gathered on the end of the unfinished bridge. He unintentionally stepped on Sasuke's leg while running. He wasn't even aware of it at the time, but Sasuke's leg broke and his step became extremely powerful due to the chakra's intense flow through his body. He continued to move without even realizing what he had done. Naturally, he believed Sasuke was dead, so even if he had, it wouldn't have stopped him. Naruto arrived at the thugs' gathering. Unthinking, he began to attack them. In an attempt to reach Gato, the short man in the back, he tore one after another apart. Many of the mercenaries were torn apart by the furious Naruto, even though some of them fled from him and jumped into the water. When he finally located his target, he merely used a clawed hand to tear out Gato's throat while smiling at the short man's fear. After laughing and tossing the body over the bridge's end, he passed out and fell to the ground. End of flashback as Naruto told Hinata what he had done. Tears welled up in his eyes. She simply embraced him. She was there for Naruto, and he appreciated that. Desperate to keep her close to him, he held her close. She put her arms around him and held him while he sobbed and let everything out. Naruto eventually relaxed and felt much better. "Thank you, Hinata," he said, his eyes welling with tears. As she waited for him to settle down and complete his story, she nodded. "Anyway, when I woke up, I found Sasuke glaring at me. He had just been knocked out, obviously, but both he and Sakura blamed me for hurting him. I'm actually surprised we passed the second exam, considering how bad our teamwork has been ever since. I guess Kakashi told them about the fox while I was knocked out, since they both looked at me with pure hate after that. They only worked with me when they absolutely had to, and neither of them lifted a finger to help me. The only time Sakura helped me was when I was out from the seal, and she was helping Sasuke, too, so I doubt it was anything personal. She just wanted to make sure we passed the exam so that Sasuke wouldn't fail. I know they both hate me now, and honestly, I don't care anymore. That's why the old man said what he did about our team accepting me and that being a big deal because of what happened with my old team. Remember when I said I would tell you why I was so willing to move so fast?" Hinata grinned. "That's why. I don't want to lose you. Not now, not ever. That's why I was so afraid to tell you what happened and about the fox. Everyone who has found out about it has rejected me. I was afraid you would, too. I'm really glad you didn't." After finishing, Naruto let out a long sigh as he reflected on all the things that had gone wrong in his life. Then he turned to face the lovely girl he was holding, Hinata. He drew her nearer to him and held her while softly massaging her back with his hands. Hinata simply held him, telling him that she was there, that she would always love him, and that she wasn't going anywhere. Hours went by while the two sat in silence, and soon it was time for them to leave for home. Naruto's apartment. On that particular evening, the sun was shining a bright orange in the tiny apartment when Naruto and Hinata arrived home in the early evening. This was Naruto's favorite time of day. When Hinata saw the sun, she smiled because the hue reminded her of Naruto's jumpsuits. Hinata looked over at Naruto. Tonight, she knew what he needed. She called out, "Hey, Naruto." His eyes were still filled with pain from remembering his team's loss as he gazed at her. She smiled lovingly at him and said, "I'll make us some dinner, so why don't you go get a shower?" "Okay." After a brief glance at the floor, he nodded. He left and went into the shower and bathroom. Hinata's expression dimmed. She vowed to do everything in her power to support him, even though she detested seeing him in that state. As she heard the shower turn on, she turned and began preparing dinner for them. In order to feel a little better, Naruto took a leisurely shower, allowing his muscles to relax as the hot water ran over him. After telling Hinata what had happened and realizing that she was still his and present with him, he did feel a little better. In fact, thinking of her made him smile. He was deeply in love with her. His muscles were at last relaxed, so he got out of the shower. Savoring the aroma of cooking, he changed into his evening attire and left. He thought, her cooking always smells so good, while he was getting dressed. The fact that his girl could turn something as basic as stew into a feast made him happy. When she wasn't doing anything that could cause her to be burned, he approached her from behind and put his arms around her. He complied with her request to sit at the table after she turned around and gave him a hug in return. Naruto surprised Hinata by giving her a hug, but she simply returned the embrace. She smiled to herself and said, "Have a seat, Naruto. Dinner's almost ready." Even after taking a shower, he was clearly feeling better. He always bounced back quickly, so she knew he would, but she didn't think it would be that simple. She got 2 bowls for them after turning and placing the pot on the table while giving him a tender smile. The young couple took their seats opposite each other and began to eat. Occasionally, Naruto would glance at Hinata and smile, but neither of them said anything. Despite noticing that he appeared somewhat tense, Hinata chose to wait for him to speak. After they had both eaten, Naruto went to his bed and sat down because he didn't want to get up. After giggling at him, Hinata took a shower. She returned with her baggy nightgown on. With her arms wrapped around Naruto and her head resting gently on his back, she lay down with him. With a sigh of satisfaction, Naruto placed both of her hands on his chest while she rested hers on his. Even though Naruto didn't intend to talk tonight, he felt compelled to do so because she was close by. "Hinata?" he asked. To let him know she was paying attention, she made a tiny sound. "Thank you, Hinata. For today, for being with me, for everything. You've done so much for me, and I want you to know I really do appreciate it." Naruto shivered and groaned as Hinata leaned up and kissed the back of his neck. She laughed at his response, repeated it, and then responded. She kissed his neck and shoulder while saying, "I haven't done anything I didn't want to do, Naruto. Honestly, I've wanted to be right here, with you, for as long as I can remember." Rolling over, Naruto grinned at Hinata. "You're too good for me, Hinata, but thank you for accepting me." She grinned and flushed at him. His love and desire filled his kiss as he leaned down to give her a gentle, then deeper, kiss, enjoying the way she made him feel. She shivered and moaned a little as he ran his hands up and down her back. That continued for a few minutes before Naruto withdrew, panting heavily. "I'm sorry, Hinata, but if we don't stop now, I don't think we'll be able to stop." Although Hinata was a little let down, she was also proud of him for exercising self-control and felt appreciated and valued that he was stating that he wanted her but would wait for her. She gave him a final, tender kiss after grinning at him. The words, "Thank you, Naruto," were spoken. She and Naruto both blushed as she said, "I'm not ready for more just yet, but I do want you to know, you're the only one I want to share my life with, and the only one I want to give my body to." The young couple relaxed in each other's arms and put their arms around each other. With a satisfied sigh, the two quickly drifted off to sleep. Gara remained stunned. 2 weeks had passed since he had lost badly to that strange kid with the bowl cut and green clothes in the preliminary match. Wasn't his name Rock Lee? Yes, something along those lines. He didn't really care, but that child was the first person he had really wanted to kill but had managed to escape. In addition, Gara had been experiencing strange power in the village for the past few days, which piqued her interest. There was a very powerful wind wielder in this village, perhaps even more powerful than Tamari in the end. At first, Gara hadn't given it much thought, but lately, he'd noticed that the same person seemed to be using all 5 elements: fire, wind, water, lightning, and earth. He had therefore made the decision to go on a sort of hunt today to see exactly what or who he would find. Remembering his last hunt, which ended with that sound guy, Dosu, as a bloody corpse, he laughed to himself. What could this one result in? Hinata and Naruto. The Namikaze mansion was close to the training ground where the young couple was practicing. While Hinata was honing her Rasengan and trying to figure out how to incorporate the chakra spinning in a Rasengan into her gentle fist, Naruto was working on perfecting his elemental Rasengan. In addition, She was attempting to use her affinity for water in both her Rasengan and Gentle Fist, and overall, she was succeeding fairly well. From somewhere nearby, Naruto suddenly felt a strong desire for blood as the young couple trained. He glanced around, trying to figure out what he was feeling. Then he recalled the sensation he had experienced while battling Lee from that Sand Genin, Gaara. It was the same feeling. Gaara was close by, then? That made sense. Naruto had observed that Gaara appeared to be the only person he had ever encountered with chakra on par with Naruto's own. He wondered if Gaara would be like him. He made the decision to confront the boy. As he moved between Hinata and where he believed Gaara to be, Naruto said, "Come out, you. I know you're there." Shortly after, Hinata noticed a young boy, who she assumed was their age, emerge from a bush on the edge of the clearing where they were training. He had a gourd on his back and the kanji for love on his forehead. She wasn't overly concerned because Naruto appeared to have been aware of his presence. But she did not practice in the presence of this boy. She waited to see what would happen, staying behind Naruto. Gaara fixed Naruto with her gaze. He remarked, "You're like me. Who are you?" Naruto grinned. "I had the feeling we were the same. Who is it?" "Shukaku, a sand spirit, the ghost of a monk who was sealed in a jar of tea years ago. My father sealed him into me before I was even born. As a result, I destroyed my mother's life by entering the world. As I was born from death, now my purpose is death. I will end all other existences than my own in order to prove my own existence," Gaara stated. Every word he spoke had an insane undercurrent of pain, despite his deep and low voice. "Who are you?" "I am Naruto Uzumaki. If you mean who I hold the Kyuubi, the nine-tailed fox. It was sealed into me when I was born. That's all I know. My purpose is to protect those precious to me, and so help me, if you come after them, I will end you," Naruto said in a voice that became darker towards the conclusion. Gaara had a startled expression. His own existence, presence, and power were dwarfed by this one. It had suddenly appeared out of nowhere, and he was aware that he would perish if he attempted to harm this boy. He was instantly aware that this boy could completely destroy him with a single move, though he wasn't even sure how he knew. Gaara kept a close eye on things, but Naruto managed to move around him from behind. The blonde was standing there when Gaara turned. He looked down as he heard something. A white ball of pure chakra was in Naruto's hand, just inches from Gaara's abdomen. Naruto laughed. "My water chakra would destroy your sand armor. My fire chakra would burn you. My lightning chakra would shock you. My wind chakra would cut you, and my earth chakra would grind you to dust. Oh, and the non-elemental chakra that is the base of this sphere would simply tear you to pieces. I could have easily killed you just now," Naruto stated to the stunned Gaara. Gaara gazed at the boy who was holding the jutsu as well as the jutsu itself. "How are you so strong? What drives you? And why would you use this power for anyone but yourself?" asked the man. In fact, he had some curiosity, but his main goal was to find out what made this boy so much stronger than himself. Hinata was pointed at by Naruto. Then he said, "See her?" Gaara gave a nod. "She is the one I would use it for the most. She saved me from my darkness, from myself. She accepted me when no one else did. When all others hated me, she loved me. When all others rejected me, she clung to me. She brought me from the darkness and into the light, and I love her more than life itself." Gaara was taken aback. "Love?" he asked. He was struggling to keep from going into shock when he asked himself, "Is that what makes you so strong? You become strong because you desire to protect someone precious to you?" Naruto gave a nod. "Gaara, I know how hard it is to have no one, but you're not alone now. We may not be friends, at least not yet, but you and I are alike. We are both Jinchuriki, and now you have me. I accept you, I won't hate you, and I won't try to attack you." It was as if something had broken inside Gaara's head. His ideas and convictions were no longer valid. He wasn't by himself, he was not the only one. He gave Naruto a serious look. At last, he extended his hand to Naruto. After a brief moment of confusion, Naruto took Gaara's hand and shook it. Gaara appeared in disbelief. He was, in fact, absolutely stunned. In just a few minutes, this boy had altered his entire worldview with just one word and one action. With a genuine smile, Naruto favored Gaara before withdrawing his hand. "Oh, and Gaara, just so you know, I would fight just as hard to protect anyone in this village as I would to protect Hinata here. One day, I will be the Hokage and protect this whole village, because every single person in this village will be precious to me, no matter what they think of me. Find your precious person, Gaara, and put your life into protecting them. Then you will find true strength," Naruto said, not realizing the enormous effect his actions were having on Gaara. "How do I find my precious person, Naruto Uzumaki?" asked Gaara. Naruto paused for a moment and then responded, "Just Naruto, please. And to find your precious person, or people, find those to whom you are precious. Those should be the ones you protect and fight for and love. That's how I found Hinata here. She was the only one to care for me. You remember, she called to me in the preliminaries. That's where I found her." Gaara gave a nod. He said, "I see. Thank you, Naruto. I hope we may become friends. Now I must go and think upon who my precious people are," before bowing and walking away. After the boy left, Naruto laughed. He whispered, "I just know we'll be friends, Gaara." He turned back to Hinata after Gaara had been gone for a few minutes, and the two resumed their training. That night Naruto felt content with this day. It was a good day, considering what had transpired with Gaara and the training he and Hinata had completed. The elemental Rasengan, as he had named it, was completely under Naruto's control. Hinata was proficient in her water-style chakra sphere. Hinata's water-style Rasengan easily defeated Naruto's fire-style Rasengan in a test between the young couple. Fortunately for both of them, they were motionless when they were touched. Otherwise, Naruto's hand would have probably been struck by Hinata's water-style Rasengan, which would have been catastrophic at best. For her part, Hinata was quite happy. In addition to spending some quality time with Naruto and mastering her water-style Rasengan, she had witnessed for the first time how quickly Naruto could transform people. The ease with which he had communicated with Gaara had astounded her. In her heart, though, she was proud of her fiancé. She knew that she was more in love than she had ever been. She paused as they walked into their apartment together, kissed him, and shut the door. After locking the door, Naruto went to prepare their meal. Gaara in the meantime, the young couple was unaware that the red-haired boy had entered the hotel rooms that he and his siblings were sharing in Konoha. He wondered how his two siblings felt about him as he glanced at them. He was aware that they could easily be his beloved people if they experienced anything other than fear. He laughed to himself because he had never before even thought of that as a possibility, but after giving it some thought, he realized that they were always present and had trained to be able to fight him. Tonight, he would need to speak with them, listen to their feelings, and find out what was happening. He was saddened by the slight tensing of Temari and Kankuro as he approached, but he understood why. He was a bit of a homicidal maniac before this, after all. To solve this, he would need to speak with them. He whispered, "Temari, Kankuro, I need to speak to you." Both of them gave a nod. He asked them, "Am I precious to you?" Temari was taken aback. "Of course you're precious to us, Gaara. You're our little brother," she replied. Kankuro gave a nod of agreement. After giving that some thought, Gaara concluded he had nothing to lose. He said, "Do you love me?" to both of them. After hearing this, both appeared stunned, but they eventually nodded once more. "Like I said, Gaara, you're our brother. Now what's this all about?" Temari responded. Gaara made the decision to feel them out a little more rather than explain everything that had happened. His words, "I could have died today." Temari and Kankuro appeared both astonished and frightened. His siblings were aware of his plan to invade Leaf Village, and he spoke of it. "I see from your face you know the level of power that would take. But believe me when I say my life was in the hands of another and he gave it back to me. I see you are afraid of this power. I do not fear it, but I do fear for us if we go through with this plan." Naturally, their father, the Cage, had given the order, but there was no doubt that the plan would fail without Gaara. In fact, I believe the Cage is no longer himself. He has betrayed the best interests of our village. Now, if you two are with me, we can take our knowledge of this to the Hokage and offer our aid. We must break our alliance with the Sound. Temari and Kankuro were staring at one another. They certainly weren't anticipating this, but they would follow Gaara if he were to deviate from the plan. In addition to being their brother, they knew they would perish if he opposed them, regardless of whether someone stronger than him opposed them. They gave their brother a quick glance and nodded, indicating that they would follow him. Tsunade was wrapping up her daily responsibilities in the evening. Sarutobi had gone home for the night, leaving her to handle the paperwork. She laughed. She didn't have to enjoy this, even though she knew it was training for her new role. A knock on the door interrupted her as she was completing her final stack of papers. She said, "Come in," loud enough for people outside to hear. Tsunade was shocked to see the three Sand Genin standing in front of her when she looked up. She put down her pen and stamp and turned to face the three young people. She said, "What can I do for you?" Gaara, the redhead she assumed was his name, answered, "It is not what you can do for us, Lady Hokage. I have information that will have very dire consequences for the Leaf Village. I have come here, along with my siblings, to warn you that the Sand and Sound Villages plan to betray and invade the Leaf Village during the Chunin exam finals." To put it mildly, Tsunade was taken aback. They were going to betray the Leaf Village during the Chunin exam finals, and this boy, Gaara, had just appeared out of nowhere and was telling her that their ally, the Sand, had a partnership with the Sound Village. But hold on. With suspicion sparked, she questioned, how can I trust this information? Tsunade knew that would be a bit absurd, but she wasn't going to take any chances. After all, what better way to further this plan than for you three to gain my trust, if the plan in fact exists, and then have you three betray that trust? She asked. Tamari let out a sigh. If we were going to continue with the plan, I assure you we wouldn't be here. In point of fact, we are the children of the Case Cage, that's how we know of this plan, as well as playing key roles in it. Specifically Gara here. She was referring to her youngest brother. Tsunade placed her chin on her hands and interlaced their fingers. After carefully examining the three in front of her, she said, all right, you made your point. Now, you are going against your own village in doing this. Why? Gara took a small step forward, saying, I spoke with one of your ninja, his name is Naruto Uzumaki. He is like me, a Jinchuriki. I know he is more powerful than I, and he could have killed me, but he allowed me to live. I intend to repay his mercy, for one thing. For another, I have come to the conclusion that our father, the Case Cage, is no longer acting in the best interests of our village. As such, we intend to see to it that our alliance with the Sound is ended, and do what we can to help you. Tsunade didn't need to be very good at reading people to figure out that Gara was telling the truth. She guessed that Gara's conversation with Naruto had something to do with the boy's transformation because she had previously known him to be completely heartless. She let out another sigh. This was a serious issue. She addressed them, saying, all right, you three, as Hokage, I will accept your aid and any information you can give me will help. However, what is it you want in return? Gara smiled slightly. I would like to make a selfish request, Lady Hokage, he replied. Tsunade signaled to him to go on by raising one eyebrow. Once this fiasco is concluded, I would like to hire Naruto and his team for an extended period of time, probably close to a year, to advise me in setting up a new council and so on in Suna. That was not what Tsunade had anticipated. She said, you think you'll be called Case Cage? To the boy. Gara let out a sigh. With pride and fear in his voice, he declared, there is no one in my village more powerful than myself. Also, no one would dare challenge me. As such, there is no one else to take the position besides me. I would, of course, pay the team for their services. All right, Tsunade replied, relieved that it wasn't something more serious but still unsure of the source of the request. She said, anything else you may want? Each of the three gave a headshake. All right then. Now, what can you tell me? Naruto was waking up while Tsunade was being briefed on the plans of the Sand and Sound. He was wrapped up in Hinata's arms, and she seemed to be holding him a little tighter than usual. Of course, he didn't mind. Careful not to wake her, he lay in her arms and gently rubbed her back. After 10 minutes or so, the indigo-haired beauty in his arms started to move. With a slight stutter in her half-awake state, she said, Naruto? His response to her was, I'm here, Hinata. She rubbed her eyes and slowly woke up, and he laughed. Her question was, where am I? Naruto gradually became aware of what was going on. At least that was his belief. In an attempt to clear her mind of whatever was confusing her, he said, you're at home, Hinata. Where else would you be? Looking around, Hinata saw that Naruto was in his pajamas, realized that she was in his room, blushed deeply, and then did something she hadn't done in a week or more. She passed out. Naruto was powerless to stop it. Her expression when she looked around, completely bewildered, was just too cute. Then she passed out like that. It was simply too adorable. He started giggling. 5 minutes later, Hinata was holding his sides and laughing so hard that he was crying when he woke up. Inquiring as to whether her crush had completely lost it, Hinata said, Naruto, what is S.SOF? Funny. Hearing the concern in her voice, Naruto turned to face Hinata and wondered what was wrong. What do you mean, Hinata? You're joking, right? I mean, you've been here for some time now, I don't know where else you think you would be, he replied with a worried tone. Now that she was fairly certain Naruto had completely lost it, she exploded, I should be at home, Naruto. What in the world do you mean I've been here for some time now? Finally, or at least partially, Naruto understood what was happening. He said to Hinata, what's the last thing you remember, Hinata? I remember the day before the second stage of the Chunin exams. We need to get to the 44th training ground, don't we? She replied. Naruto laughed when he said, Hinata, look at your left hand. After following instructions, Hinata noticed a ring on her left ring finger. She realized that the dream she had been having all night wasn't really a dream at all. It was true. She passed out once more. After laughing at her antics, Naruto drew her close to him and gave her a tender, affectionate kiss on the head. He reminded himself that the finals were only a few days away as he glanced at his calendar. With a sigh, he hoped everything would work out. When Hinata regained consciousness, she realized that her presumed dream had actually been actual events, and she was once again herself. She was no longer fainting or stuttering. She blushed, but returned Naruto's smile. The young couple left their apartment about an hour later, having prepared for the day. They headed straight to their usual training field. Almost instantly, Naruto started to form his wind-style Rasengan. He was now attempting to use it for more. He desired the ability to toss the Rasengan. He was attempting to learn how to throw the regular Rasengan because, while he could throw the Rasenshuriken, it required more time and chakra to form. After attempting dozens of times, he finally identified the issue after about an hour. He was unable to maintain a constant flow of chakra in the sphere once it was out of his grasp. The problem was that he didn't know how to resolve that. Meanwhile, Hinata was working on her 64 palms. She had essentially mastered it. All she needed to do now was learn the 128 palms, the next step. The more progress she made now, the better, even though she didn't think she could have it ready in time for the finals. Hinata had exhausted herself and nearly run out of chakra by the time Naruto had decided to stop throwing the Rasengan for the time being. Naturally, Naruto still had a lot of chakra, but when Hinata took a break, he sat down with her. She questioned him, "What are you working on over there, Naruto?" "I'm trying to learn to throw the Rasengan. I just can't keep a steady flow of chakra in it once I throw it," he said. He shrugged and said, "And there's not much I can do about it, either. Not that it matters, really. I mean, I'm pretty good at getting in close to hit people with it if I need to, so I don't really need to throw it." He was chuckling at that point. "I just think it'd be cool, that's all." Hinata laughed. With a hint of concern, she said, "It would be cool. Shouldn't you be working on getting ready for the finals, though?" Naruto gave her a single eyebrow lift. "Hinata, do you really think I need to train for that?" She gave that some thought. Yes, he was right. Well, no, I guess not. He gave her a smile. She was delighted to give him a gentle kiss in return when he bent down to do so. Naruto drew back and gazed at Hinata, questioning what he had done to merit such a lovely girl. Telling himself that it didn't matter and that he was just glad she was his, he shook his head. Tsunade. A few hours later, Tsunade dispatched Anbu to assemble all of the senseis and participants in the Chunin exam finals. She needed her ninja after being briefed on the specifics of the invasion plans. She also thought she would need Sarutobi, so she sent one Anbu to get him. Her office was packed in a matter of minutes. Most of the people in the room, including Naruto, Hinata, Gaara, Lee, Shikamaru, Temari, Kankuro, Shino, and Sasuke, appeared perplexed. Just after their students, Jiraiya, Guy, Kakashi, Asuma, and Kurenai arrived. Naturally, the Sand siblings wore expressions of resolve rather than bewilderment, but the others all appeared perplexed, questioning their purpose. After a short while, Tsunade called the meeting to order as Sarutobi entered the room. "All right, everyone, we have a situation here," Tsunade stated. "I've been told by Gaara, Temari, and Kankuro here that we are going to be betrayed. Their village has made an alliance with the Sound Village, and they intend to attack us during the Chunin exam finals." Everyone in the room, with the exception of the Sand siblings, Naruto, Hinata, and Shino, cried out, "What?" She was a little taken aback that neither of them reacted, but she remained silent. She glared at them all to tell them to stop talking and pay attention. "You heard me," she said. They did. "Now, since we have this information, we can plan accordingly. And from what they've told me, I believe the leader of the Sound Village to be Orochimaru. So we must plan for that as well." Everyone was taken aback when Shikamaru appeared, with the exception of Asuma, who was aware of the boy's genius. When he said, "Please, Lady Hokage, allow me," everyone started paying attention to him. "First, I need to know who will be available for this operation." That night, Shikamaru spoke until the wee hours. They had a good, practical plan in place, and everyone knew their role in it, even though it was long after dawn when they all went home. They needed to rest because they had just 2 days left before the finals began. As a result, the group dispersed and took the next 2 days off. The day before the finals, Hinata visited the Hyuga compound and discussed Hiashi's role in their scheme with him. He consented to fulfill his obligations. After discussing his role with his father, Shikamaru spent the last day with his team, reviewing the strategy and carrying out their custom of sharing a drink the night before a battle. They did almost nothing, but Lee and Guy did some training. To ensure they would be prepared for the fight, Asuma sharpened his chakra knives. Kurenai strolled around the village. just enjoying the sights and sounds she had long taken for granted, while Jiraiya spent his day spying on the bathhouse as usual. Kakashi read as much of Make Out Paradise as he could. The finals had arrived too soon for any of them to enjoy. Yes, they were prepared, but none of the Konoha ninja were anticipating the fight they knew would take place that day. Few were resigned to it, but none were looking forward to it. The majority simply dreaded it. All good things must end, though, and they all knew that this day would mark the end of their peaceful days. The finalists were all rather quiet as they filed into Chunin exam stadium. The 8 competitors were shown a bracket by the finals proctor, which indicated the opponents they would face. Naruto vs Sasuke was the first match. Naruto Uzumaki and Sasuke Uchiha, stay here. The rest of you, head up to the stands and wait your turn, he stated. Sasuke and Naruto stood facing each other, Naruto's eyes glimmering with anticipation at finally facing Sasuke. The blonde in front of him was hated in Sasuke's eyes. Between the two was the proctor. He only uttered one sentence. Everyone who was aware of what was happening believed that his words would seal their doom. He replied, "Let the final tournament of the Chunin exams begin." When the proctor yelled for the match to start, Naruto and Sasuke exchanged scowls for a short while. To the surprise of most onlookers, Sasuke made the first move. With his fist in the lead, he charged at Naruto. Easily avoiding the Uchiha's move, Naruto ducked backwards and used a low, sweeping kick to swipe at his legs. The Uchiha tried to punch down at Naruto's head after jumping over his attack. Simultaneously, Naruto kicked up at Sasuke's midsection and rolled slightly. Naruto knocked the wind out of the dark-haired boy as his kick struck Sasuke's stomach with force. Sasuke retreated, gasping for air, his arms tightly clutching his abdomen. Sasuke flew into the arena wall after Naruto used his advantage to punch him across the face. With anger visible on his face, Sasuke dragged himself free from the wall and charged at Naruto once more. Naruto stood in his ready position and waited. Sasuke punched Naruto in a fit of rage, leaving him exposed. Although Naruto was aware of this, he chose not to attack Sasuke because he didn't take it seriously. When Sasuke saw this, he growled. His anger was heightened by Naruto's obvious lack of seriousness in this fight, as he rushed at the blonde once more with the intention of making him take it seriously. "Don't take this so seriously, Sasuke. Remember the plan," Naruto said softly as he ducked as Sasuke approached and launched an attack. Naruto put a hand around Sasuke's wrist while saying this. Sasuke gave Naruto a hard, once, over the face deck after yanking his arm and dragging him around in front of him. "To me," Sasuke said to the blonde, "this is deadly serious. Even if it means every single person in this village dies, I will defeat you." Naruto became furious and kicked as forcefully as he could from his awkward angle. Sasuke took the full force of Naruto's attack, which landed squarely between his legs, since he did not anticipate Naruto attacking from that position. In sympathy, every man in the stands clutched his own crotch. When Sasuke was able to breathe again, he yelled at Naruto, "That was just dirty. Just what I'd expect of a Jinchuriki." Choosing to ignore Sasuke's insult, Naruto grinned. After telling him, "Come on, Sasuke, you know better than that. We're ninja, not samurai," he launched his own assault. Sasuke leapt away from the blonde and up the wall behind him, avoiding Naruto's blow. As Sasuke accumulated chakra in the palm of his hand, Naruto watched in horrified fascination. Naruto pondered, "No, he can't be. He wouldn't use that here, would he?" As Naruto looked on, Sasuke did indeed create a lightning blade in his hand. The Chidori. The proctor merely nodded as Sasuke started his charge, but Naruto turned to him and whispered, "If he uses that on me, I will not be held responsible for what happens to him." Naruto let out a sigh. He whispered, "I was hoping I wouldn't have to use this," before extending his hand and creating an elemental Rasengan. The blonde raised his hand to meet the chakra blade with the spinning sphere he had created, just as Sasuke was about to attack Naruto with his Chidori. For a few seconds, the two jutsu clashed, sending chakra flying in all directions. The lightning chakra in Sasuke's Chidori then failed because it was cancelled by the wind chakra in Naruto's elemental Rasengan. Despite losing his own jutsu, Sasuke continued to advance due to his momentum. After tearing into Sasuke's hand and arm, Naruto's attack came to a halt when Sasuke's strength failed. By that time, the elemental Rasengan was embedded in Sasuke's chest. The Uchiha boy's heart had become a boiling liquid as a result. Before he hit the ground, the Uchiha was already dead. When the proctor saw the wreckage of Sasuke Uchiha's body, he almost choked. With a sneer, Naruto said, "He threatened my precious people. The proctor was at a loss. He declared, "Winner, Naruto Uzumaki." Naruto bowed to the crowd without wasting any time. In any case, most of them were startled into silence. The proctor and Sasuke's body were left on the arena floor as Naruto just turned to leave. Then the proctor produced his copy of the bracket for the tournament. Round 2. Shikamaru Nara vs Kankuro. "Will you two come down here, please?" Tsunade was conversing with the cage in the cage box. She had a sneaking suspicion that this man was not who he appeared to be. Based on the information that Gaara, Kankuro, and Temari had given her, she actually had a suspicion that he was Orochimaru in disguise. The man's words, "That was an unexpected outcome," gave Tsunade a little shiver. She was now positive that her former teammate was seated next to her. Tsunade responded, "It was only unexpected if you don't know those two." She spoke while closely observing the man next to her for any indication that her ruse had been picked up on. Naruto and Sasuke had a lot of bad blood between them. Sasuke reminded me of an old teammate of mine. Given how arrogant he was and how little real emotion he seemed to feel, he didn't give any. Orochimaru, who was with Tsunade, replied, "Even so, it's a bit of a disappointment to see so promising a genin die in such a way, is it not?" Tsunade gave him a perplexed look. "Well, really, the boy learned a jutsu created by the copy ninja, Kakashi Hitaki, at such a young age," he said. As the two Sannin conversed, Shikamaru imprisoned Kankuro in his shadow possession jutsu, saying, "That shows quite a bit of promise." With little self-control, Tsunade glared at her former teammate. "You speak truth, I suppose, but sometimes I wonder if a person's abilities might not be made worthless by being wielded by that person," she said. Then Orochimaru laughed. "Nonsense, no matter who wields a jutsu, the move itself is still valuable for its own sake," he stated at the time. "By the way, what was the move that the Uzumaki kid used on the Uchiha at the end there? I've never seen it before." Tsunade shrugged slightly as Shikamaru forfeited the match against Kankuro on the ground. After catching Kankuro in his shadow, he had played with him for a few minutes, only to discover that the master's puppet was still free and under his control. Shikamaru forfeited the match because he was unable to defeat Kankuro. However, throughout the match, both players demonstrated a high level of skill. Sincerely, she admitted, "I'm not entirely sure what that jutsu was. This is the first time I've ever seen it myself." Naruto and Hinata were discussing the match they had just seen in hushed tones in the waiting area. "Remember, Naruto, you have to beat Kankuro for our plan to work," Hinata stated. Naruto gave a nod. "Don't worry, Hinata. I won't let him win. I'm sure it'll be a fun match," he responded. Naruto gave Hinata a quick embrace because she appeared anxious. Grinning, she buried her face in his chest and gave him a hug in return, savoring the aroma of his body all around her. "Well, that was anticlimactic," Shikamaru was told by the proctor. "Yeah, well, I had the next couple hundred moves planned out in my head, but what good would it do me if I ran myself out of chakra?" he quipped. He gave a yawn. The lazy boy left the arena and headed back up to the waiting area, saying, "This is a huge drag anyway, so let's just forget about it." Shino remarked, "A logical choice," as the shadow user showed up. Shikamaru simply nodded before collapsing to the floor and dozing off almost instantly. Naruto's fight and his rather brutal way of ending it had gone unnoticed. When the next bout was announced, Hinata and Shino faced off. Hinata gave Naruto a firm embrace. Both Naruto and Hinata knew that Shino would give it his all, but Naruto was content as long as Hinata wasn't hurt forever. Naruto glared at Shino, who nodded in return and made a silent vow not to harm Hinata. Hinata and Shino moved toward the arena's floor. "It would be illogical," Shino said during their descent, "for me to drain you of all your chakra. You have 2 more fights to take part in. However, I must display my own skills as well." With contemplative eyes, Hinata nodded. "I know how you feel, Shino," she responded. "I'm somewhat torn as well. I would not wish to harm your colony, but most of my moves would do so, and, as you said, we must both display our skills." They had reached the ground floor in front of the proctor as they conversed. As they assumed their combat positions, he gave a nod. He yelled, "Let the third match of the Chunin exams begin," and stepped aside to give them space. Without hesitation, Hinata advanced and tried to use her gentle fist to hit Shino. Since the two had been training together for months, Shino was well aware of the potential of Hinata's taijutsu and carefully deflected her blows. When Hinata noticed that Shino hadn't yet released his bugs, the two had been engaged in combat for a few minutes. She came to a halt and lost her ready stance. Shino's eyebrow went up. "We cannot fully display our powers if you are holding your insects back, Shino," Hinata said in a disillusioned tone. Shino acknowledged her point with a nod. We also cannot display our powers if you do not activate your Byakugan, he responded. After nodding, Hinata grinned and used her dojutsu. With a reciprocal nod, Shino extended his arms, letting insects drip from his sleeves. Hinata charged at Shino for the second time in a short period of time. Because she could see every tiny movement Shino made thanks to her Byakugan, it was much simpler for her to predict what he would do. Shino sent his insects flying in an attempt to cling to Hinata's body as he deflected Hinata's moves once more. Though she might not be able to see every insect, Hinata was aware of them and could clearly see the swarm of insects buzzing around her. With a sly smile, Hinata pressed closer to Shino. She hit hard and quickly, blocking one chakra point after another. She anticipated that her longtime friend and teammate would collapse when she was done. Rather, he vanished into a swarm of insects. What? Exclaimed Hinata. Had she all along been attacking a bug clone? Then, where was Shino the real one? When Hinata believed the match was over, he deactivated her Byakugan, but this was a mistake because the real Shino, who had been hiding among his swarm, kicked her in the back from behind. After pitching forward, Hinata rolled back to her feet using the force of Shino's attack. Hinata's Byakugan was back in action by the time she was able to stand. So, you hid in your swarm while I attacked your bug clone, then attacked from behind when I dropped my guard. Smart, she told her colleague. Shino acknowledged with a nod that she had discovered what he had done. He idly remarked, I doubt it will work again, however, it would be illogical to expect you to fall for the same trick twice. Hinata grinned. She then made another move to attack Shino, saying, Indeed it would, my friend. It was the real Shino this time, and in order to keep his chakra under control, he frantically dodged her gentle fist blows. Hinata threw a wide kick at Shino, who dodged it and then used one hand to push off the ground while simultaneously kicking Hinata in the midsection. He lost, but his blow did land. Hinata closed his leg's chakra points. Shino bounced around in an attempt to restore sensation to his leg, but to no avail. Hinata took advantage of the moment to refuel. Shino looked at Hinata with his dark eyes. He rushed at the girl, hoping to surprise her. He was aware that practicing taijutsu with Hinata was risky, but he decided it might be worthwhile. Hinata saw him coming and skillfully avoided Shino's moves by using her superior speed and flexibility. She once said, Nice try, Shino, as she was performing the splits on the ground after evading a punch that had carried Shino past her. But not good enough. She got up to seal the chakra point in one of Shino's shoulders, but to her astonishment, Shino swung his other arm in front of her and gave her a backhand across the face. After a few feet of flight, Hinata hit the ground with force. She stood up, wiped the blood from her mouth, and smiled at the bug. User. She conceded, Okay, that was good. Shino smiled. I've told you many times, Hinata, that you should never underestimate your opponent, no matter how weak they may seem, he stated to her. Hinata gave a nod. Indeed you have, was her response. The Hyuga girl then made another move, this time a diving kick that would have swept Shino's feet from under him, and declared, I will not be making that mistake again. After carefully weighing the risks, Shino leapt to avoid the kick because losing both of his legs would have made it impossible for him to fight. Hinata got up fast and struck his right shoulder as he was descending, numbing his dominant hand. Hinata left her ready stance when Shino nodded to her. Shino said, Proctor, in his typical monotone, I withdraw. The Proctor called the match while smiling around the senbon needle in his mouth. He declared, Winner, Hinata Hyuga. The crow gave a cheer. Even though the match was rather short, especially when contrasted with Shikamaru's time wasting strategies, it had been entertaining to watch. After bowing, Hinata and Shino returned to the waiting area to meet up with their friends. Hinata opened Shino's chakra points as they strolled. Naruto exclaimed, That was an awesome match, you too, as the two made their way back to the balcony. Lee exclaimed, Yes, most invigorating. Knowing they would face each other in the upcoming match, Tamari and Lee headed to the ground separately. Lee just leapt to the ground, landing hard because of the weights he had strapped on his arms and legs once more, while Tamari rode her fan down, relying on the wind to support herself. The fourth and last match of the first round was started by the Proctor. Tamari and Lee faced off, both anxious and excited. This was the boy who had beaten Gaara, and Tamari was concerned. Lee felt both anxious and excited. Tenten had been brutally defeated by this girl, but she had changed in appearance. Her appearance had changed from that of a murderer to that of a respectable adversary. Lee was eager to battle her. He called out to the blonde Kunoichi, Let us make this a most glorious match. Tamari smiled slightly. Yes, I think that is a good idea, she said, revealing all 3 moons as she pulled out her fan. Tamari turned her fan around. She screamed, "Wind Scythe Jutsu," and hurled a sharp gust of wind at Lee. Lee shifted, sidestepping. When Tamari's jutsu struck a tree, it ripped it to pieces. This girl wasn't playing around, Lee smiled. Lee made the decision that this time he should launch an attack. As he moved to block Tamari's view, he kicked up dust and made an ever tighter circle around her. With a sigh, Tamari rolled her eyes and swung her fan once more. Instead of performing a jutsu this time, she simply blew away the dust that Lee had created. Then Lee growled in frustration and tried again to approach Tamari. She kind of saw him coming, but Tamari was powerless to stop Lee because he was moving so quickly. Lee swung, sending Tamari flying as his fist struck her face with force. Next to Sasuke's earlier imprint, she created a matching one. It appeared as though the two had been holding hands when they collided with the wall because of the way the shapes lined up. When Naruto saw this from the balcony, he laughed. Lee had vanished by the time Tamari managed to pull herself away from the wall. Abruptly, something that appeared to be a rock sped toward her from one of the trees. Tamari turned her fan around. Sadly for her, it turned out to be one of Lee's leg weights rather than a rock. The weight slammed into Tamari's fan, tearing a huge hole in it and slamming into the ground next to the kunoichi, tearing through the wind as if it didn't exist. Lee tossed his other weight, which slammed into the ground close to the first one and flew just over Tamari's head. Tamari leapt and glanced at the two weights behind her. Lee kicked her into the air from behind as she was about to do so. He leapt to his feet, landed both feet on her back, and pushed her back toward the floor. Tamari fell face first to the ground and remained motionless. Not far from Tamari, Lee flipped over once and then landed on all fours. After checking on Tamari, the proctor exclaimed, "Winner, Rock Lee." With a groan, Tamari rolled over, her body making a shallow impression on the ground. Lee approached her and met her eyes with his. He merely said, "You should not have insulted my teammate," and then extended a hand to the girl. Lee hefted Tamari to her feet after she accepted it, and the two left the arena floor, heading back to the balcony. Standing, Tsunade made her way to the front of the cage box. "Would the 4 contestants who will be proceeding to the second round please return to the arena floor?" she yelled. Kankuro, Lee, Hinata, and Naruto descended again. "I am proud of you 4. Now, we will have a brief break to allow our contestants to rest. Feel free to move about the stadium, but we ask that no one leave the premises until the other 2 rounds are complete. We will reconvene in half an hour." As the 4 surviving competitors took a much needed rest, the crowd got up and started to move around the stadium. They were all aware that this would be one of their final peaceful moments before the invasion. Each of them relished these brief moments of tranquility because of the foreboding atmosphere. Ideally, the impending conflict could be resolved before it truly began. The half-hour interval between rounds had gone rather smoothly. Sasuke's declaration to Naruto during their brief battle was the subject of whispers throughout the stadium. Sasuke's cause was not being taken up by any spectator, judge, or other individual. The Uchiha had even gone so far as to say that he hoped his own village was destroyed, or, at the very least, that he didn't give a damn. Naruto and Kankuro were anxious and anticipatory as everyone prepared for the second round. Gaara had been eliminated, and Kankuro had been informed that his match in the second round would now mark the start of the invasion. When Orochimaru returned to his seat in the cage box, he had spent the 30 minutes since the first round ended wandering through the stands and chatting with some of the spectators, seemingly at random, without noticing the sand that now surrounded 3 sides of his seat. There was no chakra in the sand, and besides, Gaara was on his side, so even if he had seen it, he would have thought it was harmless. After being summoned, Naruto and Kankuro moved to the arena's base. Naruto was in his ready stance and Kankuro had his puppet out as they faced each other. Naruto moved when the proctor started the match. The puppet of Kankuro shifted to block his path. To get out of his way, Naruto just backhanded it. Unprepared for Naruto's punch, Kankuro took it squarely on the jaw after being shocked by how effortlessly the blonde had brushed off Crow. Kankuro rolled to a halt after flying a few feet. Naruto laughed. It was nearly too simple. It was too easy, as it happened. Suddenly, a vicious uppercut came from right beneath Naruto's feet, sending him skyward. When Naruto's guard was down, one of Kankuro's puppet's arms, which had been hidden in the ground and separated from the rest of the puppet, flew up and struck him in the chin. Instead of landing on his head or back, Naruto flipped and landed in a crouch by using the momentum of the attack. He smiled at the dark-haired boy and rubbed his jaw. "Good move, Kankuro," he remarked. "But it won't be working again." As Kankuro got back on his feet, he simply smiled and twitched his hands. Each limb grew a blade from where it had been attached to the puppet's torso, and Crow's head and limbs all separated. These 5 blades flew at Kankuro's blonde opponent at breakneck speed. Naruto could hardly avoid them all. The head appeared to be staring up at Naruto as it impaled the ground. With a laugh, Naruto picked it up. He threw it once into the air and punched it hard when it landed, sending it flying in the direction of the puppet master. Just before the blade impaled his throat, Kankuro was able to regain control of Crow's head. As he created numerous shadow clones, Naruto smiled. "You might have been able to hit one of me," said another. Another said, "But how about all of us?" Kankuro smiled. It was going to be enjoyable. Crow threw pellets at the throng of blonde clones as he flew through the air. Each pellet burst into black smoke. Although Kankuro wasn't using poison in this instance, he wasn't above concealing himself with smoke. He had Crow start reducing the number of Naruto's clones after he leapt into the trees close to one of the arena's walls. When Naruto felt his clones dispelling, he laughed. One of them had just so happened to spot Kankuro making his way into the trees. To boost the numbers, Naruto created a ton more before sneaking into the trees himself. The real Naruto hid among the trees, where Kankuro was already hiding, while Crow flew, hitting here, stabbing there, and impaling next. In one hand, the blonde silently formed a Rasengan. He moved as the last of his clones dissipated. Naruto rushed towards the tree where Kankuro had taken refuge. He shrieked, "Rasengan," and drove it into the tree, shattering it into splinters. Kankuro landed back in the center of the arena after barely making it out of the tree. He was shocked that Naruto had discovered him so quickly, even though he didn't want to admit it. He was starting to think that Gaara could have been killed by this boy. With a laugh, Naruto walked back out of the trees to confront Kankuro once more. "I sensed a presence on my first C rank that even my Jonin-sensei didn't notice, and you really think you can hide from me?" he rhetorically asked. Kankuro was taken aback by that, but upon reflection, he shouldn't have been. All he truly knew about the blonde in front of him was that, of all people, he was capable of killing Gaara. When Kankuro said, "Maybe I can't hide," he smirked. "But I don't really need to when I can defeat you without hiding, do I?" Kankuro simply grinned at the blonde's arrogance and shifted his hands to launch Crow at the boy once more. Naruto shook his head in a manner that screamed, "If you only knew." Crow's mouth agape, it flew at Naruto. With his weight supported on his arms, Naruto ducked beneath the puppet and kicked upward. The puppet's torso took the brunt of the blow and broke upon impact. Crow's torso was no longer useful, but its arms, legs, and head were still clearly lethal weapons. Naruto rushed towards the puppeteer. The blonde said softly, "I'll repair him for you after we're done here." Kankuro nodded gratefully as he ducked under Naruto's kick. Naruto jumped to avoid Kankuro's low, sweeping kick before the two squared off once more. Kankuro was the one who attacked this time. After frantically dodging Crow's flying limbs, Naruto collided with 2 shuriken that Kankuro himself had thrown. Each blow to Naruto's arms came just above the elbow. The signal was that. A lot happened all at once in the next second. A genjutsu was cast on the spectators, causing them to fall asleep. Kankuro threw the 5 pieces of Crow that were still usable toward the cage box, seemingly aiming for Tsunade. Gaara stood up and wrapped both Tsunade and Orochimaru's feet in the sand that had been behind Orochimaru's chair so neither could move from where they stood. 4 figures concealed in the crowd leapt from their disguises to the roof of the cage box. Orochimaru stood and grabbed Tsunade, kunai to her throat, and nearly 30 leaf anbu started moving through the crowd, killing anything awake and wearing a sound headband. Gaara entered the cage box and scowled at Orochimaru as the leaf anbu destroyed the sound invaders that had been hiding in the stands. "So, Gaara, you've made yourself known. What is the meaning of this?" Cage grumbled. "You were meant to aid the invasion, not impede me?" Gaara simply smiled and pulled Tsunade out of his sand. Orochimaru dropped the kunai at her throat, letting her escape, but Tsunade leaned forward and bit his hand at the same time. Gaara swiftly covered Sanin, the snake, with sand. Orochimaru yelled repeatedly from inside the sand coffin that he would eventually get out of it and that a simple move would not kill him. Gaara made a fist and raised a hand. As the Sanin transformed into the Ninin, Orochimaru abruptly stopped his tirade. Tsunade smiled wryly at Gaara. She remarked, "That was anticlimactic, to think one of the Sanin would be killed by a lowly genin," she added, shaking her head. Gaara laughed. "True, but I'm no ordinary genin," he replied. Tsunade acknowledged his point with a nod. Meanwhile, the so-called Sound 4 were surrounded by leaf anbu on the roof of the cage box and promptly gave up. The red-haired boy carried a gourd on his back, which he formed from his sand. The invasion of the Leaf Village ended before it had really started as Leaf ninjas swiftly drove out the remaining Sound troops. As all of the Leaf Village's military might pressed down on them, the few sand ninja who had persisted in opposing the Leaf in spite of Gaara's change of heart soon gave up or perished. One Kakashi Hitaki was addressed by one Might Guy. "How many did you take down, Kakashi?" asked he. Kakashi let out a sigh. 23 was his response. Guy took a moment to launch one last sound ninja through a wall close by. Retorting, "That was my 25th, he grinned broadly and his teeth gleamed as he exclaimed, "Guess I win again, Kakashi." Kakashi simply shook his head and sighed. Guy laughed. "I love that too. Cool attitude of yours, Kakashi. It is why you are my eternal rival." A red-clad man with long white hair landed hard next to the two as they were slowly lowering themselves out of their ready stances. Kakashi gave a single blink. Calmly, "Oh, hi Jiraiya," he said. In contrast, Guy leapt forward about a foot. He exclaimed, "Master Jiraiya," with excitement. He gave the man a firm handshake and said, "It is an honor to finally meet you." After a while, Jiraiya took his hand away from the green-clad Jonin. Retorting, "Yes, you as well, Guy, Kakashi, Guy, I was sent to fetch you too and bring you to the cage box, so please, follow me." Gaara, Temari, Kankuro, Naruto, Tsunade, Kakashi, Jiraiya, and Guy were all inside the cage box in a matter of minutes, and a silencing seal was put in place to prevent them from talking to each other. Everyone stood up when Tsunade said softly, "We have a problem. Shikamaru is missing." XXXXXX Baki, meanwhile, was carrying a human-shaped bundle as he ran toward the Leaf Village's main gate. He was among the few sand Jonin who had stuck with the cage, even after Gaara had switched sides. He was the only sand ninja left who dared to confront the Jinchuriki, or was foolish enough to do so. After making his way to the candidate waiting area, he kidnapped Shikamaru Nara. He was running now. Meanwhile, Shikamaru was gradually awakening. Baki hadn't bothered to use a sleeping jutsu on the shadow user, who was already asleep. Shikamaru had to roll away from the Jonin as they both fell hard to the ground after Baki suddenly stumbled and fell flat on his face. With haste, Shikamaru stood up and turned to face the man. The two glared at one another as Baki stood up. Neither of them wanted to initiate contact. Shikamaru laughed. They were encircled by shadows. The sand Jonin had transported him to the perfect setting for him. With wind chakra accumulating around him, Baki finally launched an attack on Shikamaru, intending to rip him to pieces, just as he had recently done to a certain Leaf Jonin who had overheard him and Kabuto conversing. This was going to be such a drag, Shikamaru moaned. Using his chakra, he extended his hand and captured as many nearby shadows as he could. The shadows were pushing Baki around from one place to another. The young boy started to throw sharper shadows at the Jonin after Shikamaru growled at him, saying, "You know, this is a total drag, but you really should have known better than to try to attack the Leaf Village. Every single one of us will put our lives on the line to stop you, regardless of our rank." Unable to do much in the forest's darkness, Baki was pierced multiple times while attempting to hurl wind blades at the young Nara, which were easily avoided. Baki growled. "Yes, you would put your lives on the line for your village, just as I am doing for mine," he responded. Then, wind blades flying, he ran at Shikamaru once more. Shikamaru, complaining that everything was a huge drag, sent a single shadow in the direction of the running man while falling backwards completely to avoid the blades. Baki froze abruptly. "Shadow possession, complete," proudly exclaimed Shikamaru. Baki growled, but Shikamaru ignored him. "Now, until my comrades get here, why don't we have a little chat?" Baki said. To Baki's chagrin, Shikamaru backed up a little and sat on a rock, forcing the Jonin to stand exactly where Shikamaru was sitting with nothing to support him. "Look, Baki," expressed Shikamaru. "I know you think you're fighting for your village, but the man who you think is your cage isn't. That was Orochimaru." Baki appeared startled by this. "Your cage never made it to this village, he was killed on his way here." "Okay, let's assume for the moment that I believe you," Baki said after a brief pause. "Why would you tell me this, and why would it matter? I was ordered to attack, that's all that matters." Shikamaru grimaced. "Think for yourself, Baki. Do you really think Orochimaru would be true to his word and not betray your village the way he betrayed his own years ago? Come on, man, think," he pleaded. "Plus, even your own students are fighting against you, so why keep fighting when even they don't think what you're doing is in the best interests of your village?" Baki nodded slowly. When he said, "All right, I surrender," Baki fell to the ground in a very undignified manner as Shikamaru quickly freed the man from his shadow possession jutsu, causing his exhausted and sore legs to give way. And at that moment, Pakun led Kakashi and Guy onto the scene. XXXXXX. The audience was starting to awaken back in the arena. Tsunade addressed them and said, "We apologize for the interruption. The previous match was called due to circumstances, and Kankuro forfeited, so Naruto will advance to the finals. Proctor, please begin the next match." The proctor gave a nod. "Hinata, Hyuga and Rock Lee, please come down," he shouted. He yelled, and now the final match of the semifinals begins. As soon as the two competitors were on the arena floor, and he leapt out of the way. Lee and Hinata squared off, both in a prepared position, Hinata brandishing her Byakugan. Lee was the first to speak. "Lady Hinata, let us make this match as youthful and exciting as we can," she heard him say. Hinata grinned a little because she liked the enthusiastic boy, even though Neji was always talking about Lee. Lee stepped forward to shake her outstretched hand. "Yes, Lee, let's put on a show for the audience," she replied. The match started after both backed up once more. Hinata was the first to move, her chakra flaming hands. Lee was aware that even a glance could result in significant harm, so she frantically dodged and deflected her attacks. This wasn't the usual battle for the Chunin exam finals, but whatever, Hinata grinned. Lee was spinning when she delivered a low, sweeping kick that struck his arm, which he had been balancing on after avoiding her earlier blow. After Hinata's attack, Lee stood up and smiled at the girl. "I see now why you were able to defeat Neji," he replied. Hinata merely grinned. "All right then, my turn," Lee exclaimed as he rushed toward Hinata, his arms and legs flying in all directions. Hinata easily sidestepped and blocked his blows, but Lee suddenly accelerated. He yelled, "Leaf Whirlwind," as his last kick struck Hinata's cheek, knocking the girl several feet away. She settled down on her back. The girl stood up again, wiped blood from her mouth, and took a few deep breaths. She smiled and said softly, "A fine attack, Lee." Lee nodded and smiled back. But not good enough. With her hands flying swiftly and her Byakugan active, she charged at him once more. Lee was hardly able to block or deflect her attacks because he was unprepared for her to strike so swiftly and forcefully again. Without using words or hand signals, Hinata created a single clone that formed a weak Rasengan and launched a surprise attack on the preoccupied Lee. Lee was launched into the air once more, landing dazed and buried in the arena's far wall. The proctor went to see how Lee was doing. He yelled, "Lee is unable to continue. Winner, Hinata Hyuga." This concludes the semifinal round of the Chunin exams. We again ask that no one leave the arena until after the final round, but we will again give you and the contestants a half hour to rest and recover before the finals. Tsunade stood up and yelled, "This concludes the semifinal round of the Chunin exams." Before collapsing into her chair, she was emotionally spent from the day's events. Jiraiya approached Tsunade from behind and put his hands on her shoulders. "Hey," was all he said. Tsunade grinned wearily as she glanced up at her lone surviving teammate. Kneeling before her, Jiraiya took her hand in his. "You okay?" Tsunade responded, "Yeah, I think I'll be fine." After a brief pause, Jiraiya simply patted her hand and said, "Thanks." Tsunade shed a couple of tears. "I know I shouldn't be sad, but he was still my teammate." Jiraiya stood up and gave Tsunade a hug. For a short while, the two surviving Sannin wept over the death of their former comrade. Jiraiya held Tsunade while she sobbed on her own after first calming down. He gave her a playful peck on the cheek as he withdrew. Tsunade gave him a startled look. Jiraiya recoiled in terror. He was prepared to be thrashed for that. Tsunade simply grinned before leaning in to give Jiraiya a cheek kiss. Jiraiya stood a short distance to Tsunade's side and behind, smiling. He would stay there until the end of the finals. Maybe everything will turn out all right after all, the elderly wise man reflected. As Naruto and Hinata faced off, Jiraiya and Tsunade grinned down at the arena. They were aware that this fight would be remembered for years to come, despite the fact that hardly anyone had anticipated these two making it to the finals. Jiraiya and Tsunade both knew that even though they were now a couple, they would still put on a fantastic show. When the proctor yelled for the match to start, Naruto grinned at Hinata, saying in a low voice, "Let's give them a good show, Hinata." Hinata nodded and smiled back at him. With a smile, Naruto approached Hinata, who silently triggered her Byakugan. Although Naruto's attacks were swift and strong, none of them were meant to be fatal. Hinata deflected, blocked, and dodged some of them. This continued for a short while before Naruto launched an attack that appeared to strike Hinata in the face. With a simple smile, Hinata turned. "Rotation," she enunciated. To Naruto's surprise, her chakra launched him into the air. He landed on his back, not expecting this. Naruto smiled. He said, "Finally got it down, huh?" Hinata nodded back at him with a smug smile. He made his favorite hand gesture and exclaimed, "All right, then. No more holding back." A few seconds later, there were at least 100 Naruto clones in the arena. 10 clones of Hinata appeared in a small circle facing outward as she smiled and made the same sign. With a smile, Naruto and his clones sprinted in the direction of the Hinata circle. Hinata and her clones launched a series of gentle fist strikes as each one approached within range, with each of her clones dispelling at least 5 of Naruto's before being dispelled themselves. Only about a dozen of Naruto's own clones remained after Hinata's clones were all destroyed. Hinata let out a sigh. She exclaimed, clearly frustrated, "These clones are nowhere near as good at gentle fist as I am." Naruto laughed. He jokingly remarked, "I guess I'm still more proficient in the shadow clone jutsu than you are, Haim." After giving the Naruto who had spoken a fierce look, Hinata extended one hand and launched what appeared to be a chakra needle from her palm at him. The blow struck him squarely in the heart and was quickly dispelled. Hinata looked at the Naruto she believed to be the original. She smiled at him to show that she wasn't being cruel, and said, "Maybe so," adding, "but my chakra control is still better." After smiling, Naruto ran toward Hinata with his remaining clones. After concentrating her chakra, Hinata started to dispel the clones with her chakra needles. Before long, only the originals remained. Hinata swung around and attacked Naruto. Although Naruto appeared to be able to easily dodge and deflect her attacks, he was actually thinking frantically about how to avoid her gentle fist. When Hinata used one hand to thrust at Naruto's face, he bowed to get beneath it and smiled. At last, he was in the ideal position to avoid her attack. He grabbed Hinata's still outstretched hand by the wrist, pushed her off balance even more, and stepped into her stomach. Leveraging his unusual position, he launched her over his head. Instead of landing on her head as she would have otherwise, Hinata was able to flip over in midair, landing on all fours and sliding a little. Hinata smiled up at her longtime partner and said, "So you got me once. It doesn't matter, my gentle fist will work eventually." Knowing she meant more than she stated, Naruto shook his head. "Maybe it would if I gave you the time, but if you can't get near me, you can't use it." She replied. He took a deep breath, making hand signs quickly. He cried out, "Wind style, great breakthrough," and let out a sharp exhale. A comparatively small portion of his chakra was used to charge his breath, which turned into a strong gust of wind. Hinata was struck by the gust, but she managed to stop herself from being blown away by it by charging her own chakra into her feet and sticking to the ground. Naruto smiled. "Oh, yeah," he said, making more hand gestures before letting out another breath. As he yelled, "Wind Scythe Jutsu," Hinata focused her chakra around her body, barely shielding herself from the chakra. Charged wind, and this time his breath was formed into multiple gusts that turned into blades. "He stole that from me," growled Tamari in the stands. Tamari smiled and laughed at Gaara, who reluctantly gave it back. He was still getting used to this whole smiling thing. Gaara patted her arm and said, he wouldn't have bothered to learn it if he didn't think it was worth his time. "You should feel honored, sister." Watching his attack fail to harm Hinata, Naruto laughed. When the wind finally stopped, Hinata smiled. "My turn," she said, sounding and looking extremely menacing due to her active Byakugan and her slightly sadistic voice. Naruto smiled. Hinata held out a palm and went through a series of hand signals. She exclaimed, "Water style." Ripping torrent. Water sprang from the surrounding air and gathered on her palm to form a whirlpool. She turned her hand and threw it at Naruto. As Hinata kept feeding the jutsu chakra, it grew as it moved. Just as the attack was about to reach him, Naruto leapt, using chakra to charge his feet. He just managed to get through the water's torrent. He ran along the water's surface with his chakra as he descended. Startled by this strategy, Hinata could not avoid his blow, which struck her cheek with force. Hinata rolled a couple of times and flew sideways before coming to a stop. She turned back toward Naruto after stopping and slowly getting back up on her feet. The blonde was standing with his arms folded in a self-assured grin. Hinata gave a little giggle. "Oh, come now, Naruto. You can't mean to tell me you really think you know every jutsu I've learned," she replied. Naruto's smirk lost confidence as his arms dropped to his sides. After giving it some serious thought, he tried to jump, but it was too late. The Hinata in front of him vanished as soon as Naruto's ankle was grabbed by an arm that emerged from the ground next to his foot. As Hinata yanked Naruto to the ground, she yelled, "Earth style. Headhunter jutsu." Up to his neck. After struggling for a moment, Naruto discovered that he was completely immobile. He didn't find it funny. He growled and looked up at Hinata, who was now above him. "That was a cheap move, Hinata." Hinata knelt next to his head and simply giggled. She said to him, "Yeah, I know, But we are ninja after all. Besides, I had to end the match somehow, and I didn't want to hurt you, so this was the best thing for me to do, she said softly as she leaned down to kiss his forehead. Naruto gave a small smile. Love you, he said in a whisper. Hinata reddened. Love you, too, was her reply. She got up and faced the proctor. She said to the man, you can call this one, he can't continue like that. The proctor went to see how Naruto was doing. When the man saw that the blonde was immobile, he nodded. Since Naruto cannot continue, this match is over. Winner, Hinata Hyuga, he yelled. Everyone in the stands cheered when Hinata's victory was announced. Turning and releasing Naruto from her jutsu, Hinata turned a bright red. With a laugh, Naruto gestured broadly at the onlookers. He yelled, take a bow, Haim. You're the star today. After blushing even more, Hinata bowed deeply and grinned at the fans. Everyone gave her a louder cheer. At that moment, Shikamaru suddenly materialized next to Naruto. He said, hey, Naruto, Hinata, to them. Just wanted to let you two know, I'm throwing a party for everyone who was in the finals tonight. It'll be at my place at 7, so I hope to see you guys then. Hinata gave Naruto a curious glance and a silent nod. Naruto gave Shikamaru a smile. He said, sure, we'll be there. With a smile, Shikamaru put one hand on Naruto's shoulder and the other on Hinata's. He jumped up into the stands after saying, good, good. See you tonight then, presumably to inform the rest of his guests. Naruto questioned, you think it's a good idea for me to go to that? Hinata understood his meaning. Her words were, I do, Naruto, after all, if Shikamaru was going to reject you, he wouldn't have invited you to his home. Slowly, Naruto nodded. Silently, yeah, I guess that's true, he said. After giving Hinata a quick embrace, the two left the arena. XXXXXX by 6:30 that evening, there was a commotion in the Nara clan's house. They were now rushing around frantically trying to get everything ready for Naruto and Hinata's arrival at 7 o'clock. Shikamaru and his parents had invited the 5 rookies who were still alive and not on Naruto's old team because he didn't want Sakura to ruin things, as he knew she would. Tsunade, Jiraiya, Kakashi, Kurenai, Asuma, Hiruzen, Guy, Shikaku and Yoshino Nara, Shikamaru himself, Choji, Ino, Shino, Kiba, Gaara, Tamari, Kankuro, Lee, Neji, and Tenten were all in Shikamaru's foyer. They had all been working hard for at least 30 minutes and would probably continue to do so for another half hour. By the time Naruto and Hinata arrived, they all hoped to be prepared. The actual room was nearly unrecognizable. There were streamers everywhere, mostly orange and lavender, and a banner with the words, congratulations. Spread across the top of the room, there was a rather big bucket of confetti above the front door, which would spill onto the next person to enter. The balloons floated there in festive colors, making the ceiling nearly invisible. Shikamaru let out a sigh. He mused to himself, this is such a drag. You're lucky you're worth all this trouble, Naruto. It wasn't until a few days after their planning session that the shadow user gave Naruto much thought. Tsunade had asked Shikamaru to remain after everyone else had gone. Rewind when Shikamaru asked, yes, Lady Tsunade? Tsunade gazed at the boy while knitting her fingers together beneath her chin. You are aware that we are preparing now for the upcoming invasion solely because we have been warned of it, correct? She responded. Shikamaru gave a solemn nod. He knew full well that the impending battle would probably have been much worse for them if they had not known. Good. Now, I want to inform you of something else. The only reason we are aware of this is Naruto. Shikamaru appeared taken aback. He questioned, Naruto? Really? I mean, I know he's not showing his full potential, but how did he bring this about? Tsunade laughed. He almost killed Gaara, which brought him around to our side. Don't ask, it's complicated, but trust me when I say that Naruto and Naruto alone is the reason we are going to be so well prepared for this, she said to him. Shikamaru gave a slow nod. Tsunade was happy to see that he understood the significance of that. Now, there's something else you should know. Naruto and Hinata plan to get married. I know it's soon for them, but they're mature enough to make that decision. So, what I want you to do is to quietly inform the others of this, though not Sasuke or Sakura, and see if you can't do something for them. They deserve it. End of flashback. Shikamaru had followed instructions. He told Choji first, then Ino, and the 3 of them told the other people who were in the Nara house at the time. In addition to celebrating their engagement, this party also commemorated Naruto and Hinata's victory in the Chunin exam finals and their victory over the Sound Village. Shikamaru grinned. Yes, Naruto, you are indeed lucky, he reflected. He returned his focus to party preparation after thinking, you've got a hell of a woman, and tonight you'll discover that you really do have some good, true friends in this village. Getting ready could be a hassle, but if things weren't ready in time, it would be even more of a hassle. XXXXXX Naruto was concerned. He didn't get really anxious about anything very often, but tonight he did. For the first time in a long time, he was attending a party, and he was quite concerned that the guests would give him the same looks. For the 50th time, he asked Hinata, are you sure this is a good idea? Hinata let out a sigh. She wished she could reassure Naruto because she understood why he was so anxious. Yes, I'm sure, Naruto, she said quietly to him. Shikamaru's smart. He won't have people there who will be mean to you. And besides, I'll be right there with you. Naruto gave her hand a light squeeze while grinning. He said, thanks, Hinata. That means a lot, in an impassioned tone. Hinata simply grinned at him and squeezed his hand back. He sighed once more and looked at the time. With a resigned tone, he said, well, it's time. Let's go. Having said that, the two headed to the Nara residence from their cozy yet compact apartment. At 6:59, Naruto knocked on the door. Shikamaru grinned. They had finished right on schedule. Come in, he exclaimed. Slowly, Naruto opened the door. Surprise! Was shouted by a large crowd of people as he and Hinata entered, much to his astonishment. Everyone was grinning as confetti rained down on them from above. Shikamaru caught Naruto's attention. He questioned, what's all this about? Shikamaru grinned back. Lady Tsunade told me about you two being engaged. Plus, we protected the village today, and you two were the winners of the Chunin exam finals. We're all here to celebrate all of that, he said to the blonde. Naruto surveyed his surroundings. He wasn't particularly shocked to see one of the people there, but he was surprised by the majority. With hesitation, he said, Kakashi. Sensei? Kakashi stepped forward and gave Naruto a sad look, with a single tear visible in his eye. In front of Naruto, the silver-haired man abruptly fell to his hands and knees. He sobbed, I'm so sorry, Naruto, I'm so sorry for how I acted toward you. I should have been there for you from the start, and I wasn't. Your father was my sensei and like a father to me, so I should have been the one who was there for you most of all. And I failed you. I failed your father. I'm so sorry, Naruto. I beg your forgiveness. He clasped his hands and begged, please, give me another chance to be there for you. Naruto was stunned. He was on his knees, pleading for his forgiveness from Kakashi, the man who had been designated as his sensei, the man who had rejected him, and the man who had caused him more pain than most. He hefted Kakashi to his feet by reaching down and taking his clasped hands. Kakashi closed his eyes and turned his attention to the floor, refusing to meet Naruto's. Naruto said, Kakashi. Sensei, quietly. You hurt me deeply for many years with your rejection. You hurt me more than most, really, because you should have been there for me as my sensei if nothing else. Kakashi gave nod. His response was, I know, Naruto, I know, I make no excuse for my behavior. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Naruto gave a nod. I can tell, he said slowly and deliberately. Yes, Kakashi. Sensei, I'll forgive you. After that, he grinned and said, I always wondered what it'd be like to have a big brother. Kakashi's expression was one of shock as he looked up at the blonde's words. The boy voluntarily ran into his arms as he slowly opened them. In an act of genuine forgiveness, the two embraced. I will never abandon you again, little brother, Kakashi muttered. With tears in his eyes, Naruto chuckled a little and whispered back, I know, big brother. Everyone cheered, and the celebration got serious. Hinata spoke with Kurenai, whom she hadn't seen in a long time, while Naruto spent a brief time getting to know Kakashi better. Kurenai had been crushing on Asuma for a while, and she urged her old sensei to go after her. When Tsunade offered them a toast, the young couple got back together. After everyone drank to them, Hinata was swept onto the dance floor by Naruto, who was unpredictable as usual. Before long, everyone was dancing, either by themselves or with a partner. Everyone seemed content to be alive that evening, regardless of the situation. Several hours passed before Naruto and Hinata eventually left the party and headed home. Naruto asked, You still think it was a good idea to go tonight? As they walked into their apartment. Hinata laughed. I sure do, Naruto, I sure do. After 6 years, Hinata flashed a radiant smile. The words, I can't believe it's finally here, came out of her nearly song-like voice. Her rosy cheeks and the joy in every part of her countenance made her appear to glow like the finest jewel, even though her long white gown hardly stood out against her pale skin or eyes. Hanabi chuckled a little as she observed her older sister. She remarked, I haven't seen you this joyful in a long time, Hinata. Hinata hummed to herself as she nodded and grinned at her younger sister. In response to her sister's antics, Hanabi shook her head. I'm glad you can finally be like this again. It's been too long. Hinata nodded as she reflected on the difficult times that she, Naruto, her family, and, in reality, the entire village had experienced in the previous few years. She informed Hanabi that although it had been too long, it would all be worthwhile today. Hinata spun once as Hanabi grinned. How'd I look? Hanabi sighed. By this point, Hinata had likely asked that question 5 times. Hanabi smiled and replied, as always, you look stunning, Hinata. Naruto's going to lose it when he sees you. Hinata reddened a little. She questioned, you really think so? With a confident nod, Hanabi laughed at her sister's flush. I hope he thinks I'm pretty. Hanabi gave a headshake. Oh, come on, I'm sure he thinks you're far more than pretty by now. If he didn't, I doubt this would be happening, she said, her voice sounding sympathetic. Hinata had been saying such things for days. It appeared that, for whatever reason, her previous confidence problems had resurfaced. Hanabi arrived and took Hinata's hand. Come on, she urged. She dragged the spluttering Hinata out of the room after saying, I know what you need. When Hiyashi saw his 2 daughters approaching him down the hall, he grinned. He looked at her with tears in his eyes and said, Ready, Hinata? Hinata let out a sigh. She glared at Hanabi and remarked, I guess I'm as ready as I'll ever be. Hanabi just rolled her eyes and walked away down the corridor. Grasping her bouquet with both hands, which had been in her free hand when Hanabi pulled her to Hiyashi's side, Hinata turned back to her father and grinned. After walking to the chapel's side door, Hanabi joined Ino and Tenten at the front of the room. Hinata's got the worst jitters I've ever seen. If I didn't know better, I'd swear she was getting cold feet, she complained to the other 2. Ino gave a headshake. She's just nervous, who wouldn't be? Tenten gave a nod of agreement. The 3 girls sighed dreamily. After all, she is marrying the love of her life today. This was truly a significant event. Naruto grinned at the 3 girls as he stood across the altar from them. He had made friends with them, though it had taken some time. It wasn't that difficult once they came to terms with the fact that he wasn't a fox. Hanabi was Hinata's maid of honor, and they were now her bridesmaids. He turned to his best man, Shino, and said, Thanks for being here, Shino, with a laugh. Shino just gave a nod. With a teasing smile, Naruto asked Shino, Am I right? And drew himself up straighter than usual before droned, It is only logical to assist a friend when he is in need of you. Shino let out a sigh. Indeed that is true, Naruto, but I am here not as a friend assisting you, but as a friend celebrating your good fortune. Today, you become a married man, and Hinata becomes your wife. This is not a day when you require assistance, this is a day when all should celebrate with you, he said to the blonde. Naruto laughed. He extended a hand and said, Thanks, Shino, anyway, it means a lot to me that you're here. After Shino shook the outstretched hand, the 2 resumed their wait for the bride. The doors opened again as they turned, allowing Hiyashi and Hinata to enter. Naruto watched in disbelief. Hinata's typically hidden curves were accentuated today in her long white gown, which fit her flawlessly. She was the first to truly accept and love him, so she was always beautiful to him, but today she was stunning. As she and her father walked down the aisle toward him, Hinata appeared to be beaming with joy. Not for the first time, Naruto grinned and thanked whichever god might be listening for allowing him to persuade Hiyashi to accept a non-traditional wedding. Given that his family was not present, a traditional wedding would have been incredibly awkward. Hinata joined Naruto at the altar, and Naruto grinned. No fabric could ever hide the glow she was radiating today. He could easily see her face through her veil. After a brief exchange of glances, Naruto and Hiyashi nodded to each other. With solemnity, Hiyashi gave Naruto Hinata's hand. Naruto took it gently and looked back at Hinata with affection. Hinata saw the tender expression on her longtime love's face and smiled. Stepping forward, the 3rd Hokage grinned at everyone present. Naruto briefly glanced over the faces of the guests as he talked about the love that united him and Hinata and the future they could look forward to together. Their friends were on his side because Hinata's side was crowded with her family. He received smiles from Shikamaru, Tamari, Kakashi, Gaara, Kankuro, Choji, Lee, Kiba, and, surprisingly, Neji. No one was surprised to see that Lee's eyes were streaming with tears. But to the surprise of everyone around him, Neji was crying aloud as well. As a sign of his appreciation for Naruto, Neji had told his family that he wanted to sit with the others. Now, with his eyes streaming freely, he was publicly expressing his happiness for the bride and groom. As Hiruzen posed the question, and do you, Naruto, take Hinata Hyuga as your lawfully wedded wife, to love and to hold, to honor and cherish, for better or worse, Till death do you part? Naruto turned back to Hinata and grinned. Naruto grinned, joy shining in his eyes. I do, was his response. Hiruzen looked over at Hinata. And do you, Hinata, take Naruto Uzumaki as your lawfully wedded husband, to love and to hold, to honor and cherish, for better or worse, till death do you part? Hinata grinned, blushed, and enthusiastically nodded. I do, she exclaimed joyfully. Hiruzen gave them a smile. He turned to Naruto and said, Then I now pronounce you man and wife. You may kiss the bride. Turning to face him, Naruto teased, I don't need you to tell me that. Before lifting Hinata's veil, the two leaned together as Hinata grinned up at him. Time seemed to stop for them as their lips met. They had been waiting so long for this moment, and it was finally coming. The newlyweds parted after what seemed like an eternity but was still far too short. Everyone cheered in celebration as Naruto grinned at them. Hinata tossed her bouquet while facing away from the throng. The majority of the girls let out happy squeals when a branch house Hyuga caught it. Naruto walked out of the chapel with his wife after taking her hand in his. The two started running as soon as they were outside. Both of them desired to return home as quickly as possible. They needed to change before attending the small reception. After all, it wouldn't be good to ruin their wedding attire. An hour later, perfect timing, in their opinion, as Naruto and Hinata reached the reception just in time for the toast. Speaking, Hiyashi got up from his place at the head of the table. He informed them that they were starting a new adventure today. He raised his glass to them, and everyone drank to the newlyweds. You will have many hardships, I'm sure, but if you stick together, your bond will see you through them all. He wished them many happy days, full of love and joy, and long and prosperous lives. Grinning, Naruto grasped Hinata's hand once more. Softly, thank you, father, he said. After Hiyashi took a seat, a group of people in waiter costumes emerged and proceeded to serve the guests a massive feast. When Naruto noticed Tucci among them, he grinned. He nodded to the ramen chef, who smiled back at him with a happy expression. Everyone thought the evening was a huge success overall, and the food and company were excellent. By the end of the night, everyone was incredibly happy but also exhausted. It was getting close to midnight when Naruto and Hinata left the reception and headed home. After carrying Hinata into their house, Naruto led her into the bedroom they had shared for many years. But tonight was different. They were both aware that they would make love for the first time tonight. Naruto grinned and gave his wife a gentle kiss as he joined her on the bed. Good evening, Mrs. Uzumaki, he said, and welcome to the rest of your life. Hinata simply grinned before giving Naruto a passionate kiss. Body, heart, and soul were joined that night. They had the ideal beginning to their new life together, and it was a night they would never forget.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.